Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming all of you guys. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Nice to see all of you guys here. Welcome to everyone joining online as well. This is the first day of a 5-day course that I'm teaching that's titled Experiencing the Jhanas in the 4 Stages of Enlightenment. This is where I'm going to help you guys to build up your practice to the point where you can understand that your mind is actually experiencing the jhanas and then how to move into the 4 stages of enlightenment. You're going to be learning various topics over the week. We're going to be starting with meditation this morning, but then I'm going to introduce you to the course, and then we're going to move into our first topic, which is the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the core central teaching of the Buddha. Everything that he taught plugs into this in one way or another. So you need to be able to know this inside and out, backwards and forwards, in order to be able to get to the jhanas and get to the 4 stages of enlightenment and actually enlightened itself. So that's why we're going to start with that. And then we're going to take a mid-morning break, of course, and come back and learn some more. And then we're going to take a lunch break. And when we come back from the lunch break, I'm going to teach you guys what's called the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires. This is going to help broaden your understanding of what's going on in the mind and really deepen it and provide you the solutions that you need to be able to uproot the causes and difficulties of all these discontent feelings. Because what the Buddha did is he taught how to get to enlightenment, where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, where the mind no longer experiences any discontent feelings. And you can experience that through training of the mind. So we'll start with meditation, and then I'll introduce you guys to the course. So I'm going to start with some chanting to ease into the meditation. Then I'm going to come in with some guidance to be able to help you during the meditation. Then there's going to be a period of time of quietness where we're all meditating together. Then they're going to come out of that with some more chanting. If you guys would like to chant along, you're welcome to. They're over there on the cabinet. Just keep in mind that these chants, it's not a rite, ritual, ceremony, worship, or prayer, or anything like that. This is a way today to just ease your mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. Where during the lifetime of the Buddha, he used chanting as a learning tool or as a learning device to help students commit the teachings to memory. So you guys are welcome to join in, and then I'll come back in with the guidance afterwards. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Bhutang Mahakevanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakevata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakevato Savakasangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso emakeva Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang sammuno Sakato rokavitu Anutero purisa Dhamma sati satatawa manusrang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect. just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเขวาพุทธังมหาเขวันหังอภิวาเตมิสวากขาโตมหาเขวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสรังพุทโธภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, good morning to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone here. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. This is the first day of a 5-day course where I'm helping students to understand how to experience the jhanas and the 4 stages of enlightenment. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to introduce you to the course so you'll understand what you're going to be learning over the coming 5 days. And then we're going to go into our first topics for the course. So let me just help you guys get introduced to the course, and then we'll kind of get into it and really share the teachings of the Buddha with you guys. So this is my contact information. If you guys are interested in contacting me for any reason, you're welcome to contact me. I share this more so for after this course, because if you're coming to class and you're going to be here, great, I'll teach you. But if you're not going to be here, that's okay. You just won't learn that day, or you can learn through the recording online and things like that. I'm not taking attendance. You don't need to check in with me and tell me whether you're coming or not coming. If you're here, I'll be pleased to teach you. If you're not here, then I'll teach you another time, or you can watch recordings or things like that. But after this course, you're going to need help. Nobody's going to get to enlightenment in 5 days. So you're going to need help, and this is the way to contact me. You'll find all this information on our website as well. So if you get on our website, you'll be able to see that this is on there as well. And then in terms of the way our course is structured, each day, our daily plan is that we start meditation at 9 a.m. So if you're here at 9 a.m., we do chanting and meditation starting right at 9 a.m. And then by 9:30, I'm going to switch and start talking about the teachings of the Buddha. Some people call these Dhamma talks because the word Dhamma means teachings. And the way that I think about this is I think about it like a discussion where I'm sharing information with you and helping you to be able to discover the teachings of the Buddha and independently verify those, and then you're able to ask questions to be able to seek clarification. So this is the way that I think about these. It's not a lecture, it's not a sermon, it's none of those kinds of things. It's more of a discussion where I'm sharing information, helping you to understand the teachings, and then you ask questions to get clarity on that. We're going to take a mid-morning break each morning, usually around 10:30 or 11. You'll see we take a little break. Then we come back, and we generally take lunch around 12 o'clock, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later. And I like to take an hour and a half lunch break to give you guys plenty of time to spend with each other and get some food and all that good stuff. Sometimes people even come here and they take naps. So you're welcome to come here. This place will be open for you guys. This is a temple that doesn't belong to anybody, but yet it belongs to everybody. So you can use this space as a learning center and feel very much at home here. So if you'd like to come here and earlier in the morning and do some yoga or some meditation on your own, or you'd like to stick around at lunchtime and take a little nap, feel free to do whatever you would like to do there. And then around 1:30, each time I take a lunch break, I'll tell you what time we're going to start up teaching again. Around 1:30, I'll start teaching again. And normally in the afternoons, I teach meditation. But in this particular course, we actually have certain topics that I teach that is beyond meditation because in the foundational programs, I teach meditation in the afternoons, but in this course, we do meditation together in the afternoons, but then there's usually some topic that I'm teaching that's going to help you with the content from the course. And then we generally finish around 3 p.m. each day. So this is kind of our structure each day. Okay, give or take. The times aren't like hard fast, but I usually start at exactly 9 o'clock each day. This course is based on this first book of our book series. We have a 13-book series. This first one is what I'm actually going to be teaching from for this particular course. You can actually get this for free. It's titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. You can download it from our website. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here by reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can get it on Amazon. I'm going to be teaching chapters 3, 4, 5, 8, 11, 16, 17, 18, and 20. That's what the content from this course is actually from. So you can learn in the book because there's certain things that are in the book that aren't in the course. And there's certain things that are in the course that aren't in the book. So this is not the type of book that you're going to read just one time and toss it aside. Students have been learning with me for many, many years. And there's some students who tell me they've read this 8 to 12 different times and they learn something new every time they read it. So this is a kind of book that's going to be around for a while. You don't just plow through it to try to get to the end. Instead, you just gradually take your time to learn it because you'd like to independently verify all the teachings that you're sharing. Sometimes when you're reading a storybook or a novel or something like that, you might be really craving to know what the ending of the story is. So you might kind of plow through it just to try to find out what the ending is. So I'll tell you what the ending of this story is from this book is that you get to enlightenment. That's the ending of the story. So now you don't have to rush to hurry up and get to the end. You can just take your time and gradually learn as you're going, because it's just like eating, some food. If you took a big bite of pizza, it's hard to kind of chew that and digest it. But if you took a small bite and you chew it, it's much easier to digest it. So that's what you would like to do here. You just read like 10, 15, 20 minutes a day. That's really all you need, because you need to step back and you need to independently verify what it is that you're actually reading. You're not interested in just plowing through a book like this. So take your time with it. It's the very first book of a 13-book series. Okay. These are the topics that I'm going to be sharing as part of this course. We're going to start with this morning, the Eightfold Path. This is the core central teaching of the Buddha that's going to guide you to enlightenment. This is the path to enlightenment. If you're interested in experiencing this enlightened mental state, you're going to need to know this teaching inside and out, backwards and forwards, left, right, up, down. And you're going to need to revisit it multiple times. So I'm going to teach it to you here. And if this is your first time learning it with me, then you're going to need to actually learn it multiple times. You can't just learn it one time and then perfect it. It's going to take time for you to gradually implement that into your life. But everything that the Buddha taught in one way or another plugs into this Eightfold Path. So I'm going to be sharing that with you guys today, using the original words of the Buddha. Then this afternoon, because that's going to take the entire morning with our mid-morning break, this afternoon I'm going to be teaching Transforming the Three Poisons of Craving, Anger, and Ignorance. This is where you broaden your understanding of what's going on in the mind and then really deepen it. And you're also going to get the solutions of how to fix this too. This is the purification of the mind by transforming the mind away from these pollutions. Then tomorrow, I'm going to be teaching the jhanas, helping you guys to understand what these are and how the mind is experiencing them. Because once you actually are experiencing the jhanas, your practice pivots and you start focusing on other things other than what actually led you to the jhanas. So you need to know what the jhanas are so that you know your mind is experiencing them, so you can start pivoting and focusing more directly on other things. And then I'm going to teach you the 4 stages of enlightenment and what those are and what you're going to be experiencing when you're in those 4 stages and how to actually get to those 4 stages as well. Then I'm going to teach you the 10 fetters. These are the 10 pollutions that are in the mind. When we talk about the pollutions of mind at a high level, we refer to them as the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots of craving, anger, and ignorance. But the deepest level of detail is the 10 fetters. This is what the Buddha is teaching you to be able to uproot out of your mind and get to a point where the mind's actually experiencing enlightenment. This is what you're doing when you're purifying the mind. You're purifying it of these 10 fetters. So I'm going to be teaching you guys about those. Then I'm going to be teaching on Wednesday how to develop concentration, because the world oftentimes people think is very distracting, with so many different media and so many different devices and things like this. Maybe in your workplace, sometimes maybe people might be trying to incentivize you to quote unquote multitask and things like this. So I'm going to help you to understand how to develop concentration, even though the world around you might be very distracted. Then I'm going to teach you what is the ego and how to eliminate it, because this is a very significant roadblock to getting to enlightenment. This is where the mind is measuring and comparing yourself to other people, putting yourself above people and maybe talking down to those people, or putting yourself below people and looking up to them with such awe that you think that you're below this person. So I'm going to help you to understand why your mind's doing this and where it comes from and how to actually eliminate it, because you would like to look at everybody as being equal. You're not interested in putting yourself above people or below people. So your mind can learn how to do that and be trained to do that. Then I'm going to help you to understand the evolution of your consciousness, of how even though you're in this human state, that you've had multiple animal existences. This is where I start talking about the cycle of rebirth, helping you to understand that. This is not something that you believe in. This is something that you can independently verify. So I'm going to help you to be able to see how your mind has evolved from these animal existences into this human realm, because what you're doing in the path to enlightenment is you're becoming a better and better human being. You're shedding your animalistic instincts. So it's really helpful for you guys to see what those animalistic instincts are, because in the unenlightened state as a human being, the mind acts very much like an animal. We're not animals. We're actually human beings, but the mind can function very much like an animal in the unenlightened state. But as you're getting to enlightenment, you're becoming a better and better human being. So understanding this evolution of your consciousness and that you're involved in that evolution and you can take concerted steps to improve that evolution, you'll be able to more readily make your way towards enlightenment. Then I'm going to be teaching you about fears and how to eliminate fear, because the unenlightened mind will have certain fears. You might be afraid of heights or spiders or snakes, or you might be afraid of your death and actually dying. So you can eliminate all these fears. By the time you get to enlightenment, you don't have fear in your mind. So I'm going to teach you how to eliminate your fear. Then sometimes people think that the Buddha didn't teach about this being of God, but he actually did teach about this being. You can see it in his teachings. If someone says that he didn't teach about this being, they haven't actually penetrated into his teachings deeply enough. Some people will tell you the Buddha rejected God, or he denied the existence of God. Or some people will tell you that he was asked the question about God and he didn't answer it. This isn't true. If you penetrate into his teachings, you can actually see that he taught about this being. But he didn't put this being at the center of his teachings, because it's not this being who determines whether you get to enlightenment or not. It's your decisions that determine that. So you can actually get to enlightenment with a relationship with this being, and it won't hinder you, but you're going to need to learn certain things to be able to understand that. And then you can also get to enlightenment without a relationship with this being as well. So I'm going to teach you both options. If you're either interested in having a relationship with this being or not, how to be able to get to enlightenment either way. Then I'm going to teach you what's called the 5 hindrances. These are the things that are going to obstruct you or block you from being able to get to enlightenment. They're obstacles to your enlightenment. So we spend a lot of time talking about how to get to enlightenment, but the Buddha also taught about these obstructions. So you need to know how to remove those and eliminate those so that you're not obstructed from getting to enlightenment. Then ultimately, I'm going to teach you at the very end of the course how to determine if you've attained enlightenment. And as I shared, nobody's going to get to enlightenment in 5 days, but by the time you're making your way to enlightenment, you would like to know how to determine if you've actually gotten to this mental state or not. So I'm going to teach you about that. In terms of your meditation practice, I'm going to be teaching all 4 of these meditations. Is breathing mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation, the meditation to eliminate sexual cravings, and the meditation to realize non-self. These are the only 4 that the Buddha ever taught. He never taught any others than this. In the foundational programs, I just teach the breathing mindfulness meditation. In the Harmony and Relationships course, I teach the loving kindness meditation because you need to build up that practice. But in a course like this, I'm going to teach all 4. But you're going to need to know where you're at when we talk about each one of these meditations. Maybe you need to just spend time with breathing mindfulness meditation. Even though you're learning these other meditations, it might not be the right time for you to integrate them into your life. So I'm going to help you to be able to understand that as I share them with you. And then there's the seated, lying, standing, and walking positions in Buddhist chanting that you're going to be learning. And then at the end of the course, I'm going to teach you how to take what it is that you're learning here and integrate it into your day-to-day life. Because if you sit here and you learn with me over the next 5 days, and then after the course you do nothing and you don't change anything about your life, okay, it was a good 5 days with you. I enjoyed spending time with you. Have a good, wonderful rest of your life. But if you take what it is that you learned here and you integrate it into your life, that's where you're going to see the real results. So at the end of this course, I'm going to show you how to integrate what you're learning into your day-to-day life, because that's where you'll produce the real results, is by practicing these teachings on a long-term, consistent basis. So do you guys have any questions on what I'm going to be sharing throughout the course? No questions? Okay. All right. So let's jump into the first topic, which is the Eightfold Path, the path for all humans to enlightenment. This is where you learn the path to enlightenment. I'm going to use the original words of the Buddha here. Whenever you're studying the teachings of the Buddha, you would like to use the original words of the Buddha. And sometimes when I say that, students kind of think to themselves, well, of course, like what else would I do? How else would you learn the teachings of the Buddha without using his original words? Well, you might be surprised to know that the vast majority of the world doesn't study with the original words of the Buddha. There's about 500 million people in the world that consider themselves to be Buddhist, but there's very few people that actually study his original teachings. It's more of an oral tradition that's been handed down from person to person to person. And because of that, there's a lot of confusion and misunderstanding in the teachings of the Buddha. But if you are interested in getting to enlightenment, you would like to learn with the original words of the Buddha. I've been to over 200 temples in my life, and I've only ever been to one temple that shares the original words of the Buddha. So if you do the math on that, that's less than 1%, right? So very few people in the world are studying his original teachings. And that's why we don't see massive numbers of people getting to enlightenment. But by penetrating into his teachings, using his original words, you can see what did he teach and what he didn't teach. So as I share with you his original teachings, if you've been exposed to anything related to the teachings of the Buddha in the past, you might see a lot of conflicts with what you've been exposed to in the past versus what you're learning here. And where you see those, ask questions for clarification. Don't assume that what you've learned in the past is actually true. Because right now, if you're unenlightened, then your mind doesn't have full wisdom about everything there is to know in order to get to enlightenment. So if you're in a situation where you're in a classroom and everything the teacher is teaching you are the things that you already know, you're in the wrong classroom. You're not learning, you're not growing, you're not developing. But if you're in a classroom and you're hearing things different than what you currently know, and you know that your mind is unenlightened, that's an opportunity for you to cultivate wisdom. So ask questions and seek clarification so I can help you to be able to see how what you've been exposed to in the past is actually not the teachings of the Buddha potentially, and that what you're learning here is the original words of the Buddha. So I'm going to share with you his original words to help you see what he actually taught. So this is an image of the Eightfold Path. I'm going to walk you through each individual factor here. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. It's organized into 3 sections: the wisdom section, the moral conduct section, and the mental discipline section. One of the ways you might think about this is that if you had a speaker system and you had 8 dials and you were trying to get a better and better quality sound out of the speakers, you might tweak these 8 individual dials, in order to get a better and better sound out of the speakers. So that's the same thing here as with your mind. You can tweak these 8 dials in order to get a better performing mind. So you need to know what each one of these dials are. So I'm going to walk you through this so that you can understand it. I'm going to be pausing a few times to be able to help you guys to be able to ask questions and get clarification on what it is that I'm sharing. So we're going to start with this right view, and we're going to progress slowly through this entire path on each one of these. So here's the words of the Buddha on right view. He says, "In what, monks, is right view? It is, monks, the wisdom of discontentedness, the wisdom of the cause of discontentedness, the wisdom of the elimination of discontentedness, and the wisdom of the way of practice leading to the elimination of discontentedness. This is called right view." So here what he's doing in the Eightfold Path is he's pointing to another teaching, and he's saying that's right view over there. What he's pointing to is called the Four Noble Truths. So what I've done under here, underneath of this line, is I've put the top section of the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths goes on from here, but this helps you to be able to build confidence that what he's talking about in the Eightfold Path as right view is the Four Noble Truths, because you can see the connection between the two of these. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to teach you the Four Noble Truths in a way that you can independently verify his teachings. Because in order to be able to get to enlightenment, you can't believe anything that I'm saying. You can't believe anything that I write in books or anything that anybody else says or write in books. You need to be able to cultivate wisdom. And the way that you do that is through learning, examining, and investigating something, through reflecting to verify if it's true or if it's false, and then through practicing to be able to integrate that teaching into your life to actually train the mind. So I'm going to help you guys to do this learning, reflection, and practice by helping you to learn this teaching. I'm going to introduce you to this teaching and really penetrate into it deeply. But in order to help you to understand the Four Noble Truths, I need to first help you to understand the three universal truths. These are building blocks that are going to help you to understand the Four Noble Truths. We call them the three universal truths and the Four Noble Truths because the Buddha knew that they were true. I know that they're true, and other people know that they're true. But you need to know they're true. And that's why you don't believe anything that you're learning as part of the teachings of the Buddha. I'll show you how this works, starting with this first one. The universal truth of impermanence is to help you understand that in the world around you, things are constantly changing, that there's something called a conditioned object. A conditioned object arises, it changes, and it fades away. It is impermanent. Anything that you can see, hear, smell, taste, anything that comes in contact with the body or any thoughts or ideas that go through the mind, it is all impermanent. It is constantly changing. Okay, so this is a building block to help you understand the Four Noble Truths when we get to it. What the Buddha is doing here is he's explaining to you the way the world is. He's not explaining to you the way the world should be. He didn't teach a bunch of rules and commandments, and that if you just follow these rules and commandments and everybody follows them, the world's going to become a better place. He's teaching you the way the world is, because the reason why the mind struggles and has stress and anxiety and all these other discontent feelings is because it doesn't understand the world that it lives in. He's helping you to awaken to the wisdom of how the world is truly constructed, because then you can navigate the world peacefully when you understand the world. So he's explaining to you that there's conditioned objects, and conditioned objects will arise, they will change, and they will fade away. And everything in the material world around you is a conditioned object. But then there's something called unconditioned objects. Unconditioned objects do not arise, they do not change, and they do not fade away. They are actually permanent. A permanent object, unconditioned object, is enlightenment. It's a permanent mental state because your mind is unconditioned. There's no condition that is producing the enlightened mental state. Same thing with the natural laws that the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago. Those natural laws are unconditioned. They don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. They are unconditioned. They are permanent. This is why his teachings are just as applicable today as they were 2,500 years ago. His teachings are timeless because he's describing these natural laws, and these natural laws haven't changed. So they are unconditioned. They don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. So the natural laws of existence are that way, and the enlightened mental state is that way. But everything else is a conditioned object. It arises, it changes, and it fades away. So this is about 2 or 3 minutes on the intellectual understanding of the universal truth of impermanence. But now you don't believe that. That's just the learning. That's just the examination and investigation. Now you move into reflection. To reflect, you need to look around the world to independently verify whether what I just said is true or false, because you're not interested in believing what it is that I have to share. So now look around the world to try to determine whether what I shared is true or false. And what I suggest you do is you start something that you're familiar with, like this body. You can ask yourself, is this physical body permanent, meaning it's always been the same and it never changes, or is this body impermanent, meaning it's constantly changing? So what would you say? Is this body permanent or impermanent? It's impermanent, right? Ever since the egg and the sperm came together, this body's been changing, right? We get taller, we get shorter, we get bigger, we get smaller, right? We get pimples and wrinkles and moles. Our hair grows in and then we cut it and then it grows some more, right? We start losing our hair. We get gray hair, right? When we first start, we don't have teeth, right? And then our teeth grow in, that's change. Then those teeth fall out, that's change. Then more teeth grow in, that's change. Then we get cavities, that's change, right? This body's constantly changing, right? What about your relationships? If your relationships are permanent, then that means you've had exactly the same people in your life your entire life. If your relationships are impermanent, then that means you've had people coming and going in and out of your life. So what would you say? Are your relationships permanent or impermanent? Diego, you say impermanent? Yeah. What about the rest of you guys? Are your relationships permanent or impermanent? They're impermanent, right? People are constantly coming and going in and out of your life. What about your bank account? Is your bank account permanent or impermanent? What's that? In Thailand, very impermanent? Yeah. Yeah, your bank account's going up and down, up and down. Some people's goes up, up, up. That's change, right? Some people's goes down, 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 right? That's change. What about the weather? Is the weather permanent or impermanent? It's impermanent, right? It's sunny. Sometimes it's raining. Some places it snows and sleets and tornadoes and hurricanes and things like this, right? So we could go on and on and on. And if that's what you need to do that, because you need to independently verify that everything around you is constantly changing. When you look outside and you see green leaves in the tree and you see brown leaves on the ground, that's impermanence. When you look at the wood planks of the temple and you see some of them are longer, some of them are shorter, some of them are one color, some of them are one texture, different texture, that's impermanence, right? When you're walking down the street and you see a crack in the sidewalk, that's impermanence. I don't know if you noticed, we had a certain number of people in the class, and now we have a different number of people in the class. That's change, right? Things are going to be constantly changing around you. So you need to deeply soak this into the mind so you can see that things around you are constantly changing. They are impermanent. And this is going to help you when we get to the Four Noble Truths. Then there's the second universal truth. This is called discontentedness. Some people call this suffering. If you've learned the teachings of the Buddha in other places, they might use this word suffering. I'm going to explain to you what the Buddha taught here, and then I'm going to circle back and help you to understand why I don't use the word suffering and that this is a better word. So in the original source text in the Pali Canon, the word that's being used is dukkha. This translates to discontent, discontented, or discontentedness. What the Buddha is describing here is the unenlightened mind, that it experiences conditioned feelings, that there's three feelings that the unenlightened mind experiences: pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. And these are conditioned feelings that, based on some condition, the mind is then going to experience a feeling. So pleasant feelings are things like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, or euphoria. Painful feelings are things like sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety. Very painful to experience that. Then there's neither painful nor pleasant feelings. I put boredom and loneliness here, but some people say that's very painful for them. So you could put that in the painful category if you like. But shyness is a good example of that. It's not painful, it's not pleasant, it's neither painful nor pleasant. Or say you're sitting on public transportation situation and someone you don't know comes and sits really close to you and your body's touching their body, you might say, it's not painful, it's not pleasant. Maybe your mind's kind of dissatisfied or uncomfortable in that situation. That's neither painful nor pleasant. These are what's called conditioned feelings, that based on some condition, your mind's then going to experience a feeling. So for example, if you look outside and you see that it's sunny and you get happy and excited about that, that's a conditional feeling. There needs to be this condition met in order for your mind to experience happiness. But the problem with that is that the sun is not permanent. So if you base your feelings on the sun, that means when it rains, the sun is gone, and it will be gone at some point because it's impermanent. Now you're sad. Now you're frustrated. Now you're angry or irritated or annoyed, right? So your mind in the unenlightened state is going up and down and up and down and up and down. This is what the Buddha is explaining. It's where the mind is discontent. It can't be stable and steady. So for example, an unenlightened being will wake up in the morning and see it's sunny outside and get so happy and excited because maybe there's a hiking trail that they wanted to go on, and they're going to call all their friends so that now we can go hiking on this trail we've been wanting to go hiking on. So now they go take a shower, and when they come out, it's raining, and now they're sad and frustrated and angry and irritated. An enlightened being doesn't experience that. An enlightened being is experiencing unconditional happiness, where the mind is just always happy. There doesn't need to be any condition met in order to experience that. So when they see it's sunny outside, it's like, sweet, we're going to go hiking today. This is going to be outstanding. I'm going to call my friends. It's going to be a good time. All right, let's go do this, right? And now that person goes and takes a shower, and when they come out, it's raining. It's like, okay, well, it's raining. Well, I guess I'm not going hiking today. Maybe I'll stay home and read a book, or I'll go to the mall, or maybe I'll invite my friends over. We can make some dinner or something like that. You can maintain your happiness because your happiness wasn't based on the sun, so therefore you can maintain it, right? So this is what an enlightened being is experiencing. They're beyond the conditioned feelings. What an unenlightened being is experiencing is they can only experience happiness when all the conditions are met. So if my mom and dad do this, if my brothers and sisters do this, if my boss does this, if the weather is this, if I have this kind of house and this kind of car and my bank account is like this, then I'll be happy, right? So your happiness is shrinking, right? You're sabotaging your ability to be happy because all these conditions have to be met in order for there to be happiness. This is why some people are old and grumpy or old and irritable. Not everybody's old and irritable, but that's the reason why, because they have all these things in their mind that need to be met in order for them to be happy, right? So what the Buddha is teaching you to do is to get beyond that, where you can experience unconditional happiness, unconditioned joy, where there doesn't need to be any condition met in order to be able to experience that. So I refer to this as discontent, discontented, and discontentedness. Now, some people refer to this as suffering. Suffering explains the painful feelings really well. When you're angry, when you're sad, when you're frustrated, you probably say you're suffering. But if your boss came in and said, hey, you're doing an outstanding job, I'm going to give you $100,000 a year more in your paycheck, and you got really excited about that, would you say you were suffering? Probably not, right? Or that person on the public transportation that comes and sits really close to you and your body's touching their body, would you say you were suffering in that situation? Probably not, right? So the word suffering doesn't explain the pleasant feelings and the neither painful nor pleasant feelings. You're only understanding 33% of what the Buddha was teaching here, which is the painful feelings. So you're missing 66% of his teachings. So if you use the word suffering, how could you ever get to the ultimate goal of enlightenment if you're missing 66% of a teacher's teachings? So I would encourage you to use the word discontent, discontented, and discontentedness. This is a much better way of explaining how the mind is shaken up. It's unsteady. It's uncalm. Because you need to be able to see these conditioned pleasant feelings as being just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones. What I mean by this is that if you allow your mind to get a conditioned pleasant feeling, the painful ones are waiting for you right around the corner. Because if you get so happy and excited about that brand new job that you just got, well, what happens when they go out of business or they lay you off or you get fired? you're going to be angry. You're going to be sad or frustrated, right? So the painful feelings are waiting for you right around the corner. So you need to get rid of the conditionality of these feelings, that your mind is basing its feelings on some external circumstance. You would like to get to the point where your mind's beyond that, where your mind can experience unconditional happiness, where there doesn't need to be any condition met in order for there to be happiness in the mind. If you're employed and you're making a paycheck, you can be happy with that, but you can also be happy if you're unemployed and you're in between jobs and you're looking for a new job. You can maintain your happiness, right? You can have happiness when you're with your boyfriend or girlfriend or your friends or your family, but also when you're away from them, you can also still be happy. If you can only be happy when you're with your boyfriend or girlfriend, that is conditional feelings. And now your mind is bound up and you're sabotaging your ability to be permanently happy, right? So you need to be able to see the conditionality of these feelings to be just as much a part of the problem. Those conditioned pleasant feelings are just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones, so that you can get beyond that and train your mind to just always be bright and cheerful and glad and uplifted. And there doesn't need to be any condition met in order for that to occur. So this is the second universal truth, the mind's discontentedness. Then there's the third universal truth. This is actually the solution to one of the problems that the Buddha discovered in the mind. We're going to be talking about this in more detail when the course goes on, but I'll just introduce it to you here. In order to understand this universal truth of non-self, you need to first understand the problem, because this is a solution to one of the problems that the Buddha discovered in the mind. So let me explain to you the problem first, and then I'll explain to you the solution. So in the teachings of the Buddha, you're going to learn about the 10 fetters, these 10 individual pollutions that the mind has. And the Buddha is teaching you how to uproot these and eliminate them out of the mind as part of his teachings. One of the first pollutions, or one of the first fetters, is called personal existence view. What this is where the mind clings to the body and or the mind, thinking that this is who you are as a person. The mind clings to your self-image and or your self-identity, thinking that this is who you are as a person. And now the mind wants to be perceived by others in a certain way. And you can only be happy when you're being perceived that way. So for example, let's just say you went to a social situation and you spilled something on your clothing, and now you're embarrassed. That's because of personal existence view. Because when you have clean clothes, you're being perceived the way you want to be perceived, and you're happy in that situation. But when you've got this food all over your clothing, you feel like maybe, oh, people are going to think I'm a slob, right? And now you feel embarrassed in that situation because you're clinging to this body, this self-image, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way, thinking that this is who you are as a person. If you've ever looked in the mirror and you saw a pimple or a wrinkle or a mole or a gray hair, or you started losing your hair and you were shaken up by that, that's your personal existence view, thinking that this body is you, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And you can only be happy if you're being perceived that way. Then there's the self-identity. This is like your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality. There are any number of things that you can cling to in your mind of who you think you are as a person. Like, I am American, or I am Brazilian, or I am Israeli, or I'm not sure where all of you guys are from, but I am this, I am that, I am this, right? If you cling to any of that stuff, you're just setting yourself up for discontentedness. Because if you're in a restaurant and 2 tables over, somebody says, all Americans are lovely and kind and warm and gentle. I've never heard this before, but maybe someone might say that, right? And you hear that and you're like, oh, I'm an American. And now they think they're talking about you, right? And you get so happy and you get so excited. But then because of impermanence, it's only a matter of time before someone over here starts saying something degrading and disparaging about Americans. And if you cling to that in your mind of who you think you are, now you think they're talking about you, and now you get angry or frustrated. So there's any number of things that you can cling to. Like maybe like, I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend, I am a husband, I am a wife. If you cling to this as who you think you are, when you're in a relationship, you'll feel somewhat comfortable. But when you guys break up, you don't identify with I am single. And now your mind might have felt like you wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship again because you were uncomfortable being single, because the mind identified with I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend. And now when you got out of this relationship, your mind was uncomfortable with I am single because it doesn't identify that way. And now it might have felt like the way to solve that uncomfortableness is to hurry up and get back into another relationship. So this is your personal existence view. We're going to talk about it in more detail later in the course, but I'm just introducing it to you here because what the Buddha teaches you is that there is no self. This body is not you. This mind is not you, but your mind's going to tend to cling to this, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. So you need to take care of this body. You need to take care of this mind, but it's understanding that it doesn't define who you are as a person. Sometimes people even do this with their choices and decisions. Like say you used drugs and alcohol in the past. You might think, I am an alcoholic or I am an addict. That's not true, right? That's just the mind adopting the identity that you made decisions in the past to use drugs and alcohol, but that doesn't define who you are today based on the decisions that you made in the past. But the mind will tend to do that, and now you feel guilty, you'll feel shameful, you'll think there's something wrong with you. You've got this big label across your forehead of I am an alcoholic, I am an addict, where this isn't actually true. So you need to get to the point where you realize non-self, that you realize that this body is not you and this mind is not you. And there's ways for you to independently verify this. Now, when I first start talking about this, people sometimes understand it right away. Other times, it's much more challenging because you've spent a lot of time accumulating this personal existence view over the course of your life. You know, where you grow up, they probably have a flag and a national anthem and sports teams, and you cheer and cheer. I am American, so I'm going to cheer for the American team or wherever you're from, right? But that's just what your mind has done over the course of your life. It's been conditioned to think in this way. So sometimes when I talk about eliminating personal existence view, it can be very confusing for people to think that this body is not you or this mind is not you. But just understand there's more details here to be able to understand this teaching. But now I'm just introducing it to you just so you can kind of get started with it. But later on, I'm going to explain some more of this. But even at this early stage, you can independently verify that there is no self. Here's the way you do it. Think about yourself when you were a child, when you were a teenager, early adulthood, and then now. Think about how you viewed yourself. Has it been exactly the same through all those 4 phases of your life? Say no, no. See, there's no self, right? Things are constantly changing. Here's another way. If your arm was amputated at the shoulder and you only have one hand and one arm, are you less of a person? Say no, right? So there you can see intellectually, this body is not you, right? Because otherwise you would have answered that question differently. You would have said, yeah, there's less body, so there's less me, so yeah, I'm less of a person. But hardly anybody ever answers it that way, right? The fact is that you intellectually understand that this body is not you, because otherwise you would have answered that question differently. But in the heat of the moment, when somebody says, wow, you look so handsome, you look so beautiful, that shirt really brings out the colors of your eyes. You're like, they're talking about me, right? But then it's only a matter of time before somebody says, where did you get that haircut? Are you going outside looking like that? Right? And now you're angry or frustrated. So here, sitting here thinking about it intellectually, you know that this body is not you. But the confusion of personal existence view will kick in the heat of the moment. And now you'll get angry and frustrated in certain situations, or you'll get pleasant feelings in certain situations. Here's another way. Here's a third way you can independently verify this. Point to yourself. Where are you? Maybe everyone's realized non-self already. Diego, you're pointing here? Yeah, that's a common place. People usually point here, or sometimes they'll point here. So if you point here, you need to look at what you're pointing to. You're pointing to a shirt. Ask yourself, is that who you are? That shirt you're wearing, is that you? Like if we took off this shirt and we held it up and pointed to it, is that you? That's not you, right? So, okay, throw it away. Where are you? And someone might point, right? And now you need to look at what you're pointing to. You're pointing to skin. So ask yourself, is that who you are? That skin that you've got, is that you? that's not you either, right? Like if we ripped off the skin and we pointed to it, that's not you. That's skin that you've got. So we can throw that away, right? Where are you? And someone might point again. And now we've got muscle tissue, we've got bones, we've got organs and fluid and all these different things. None of those bits and pieces and parts are you. But the mind's clinging to this, thinking that it is you. So the mind needs to get to a point where you realize non-self. And this is part of the training that you need to get to. And this is just a little bit of an introduction to it. Okay, so I'm going to pause here because these are building blocks to help you understand the Four Noble Truths. Do you guys have any questions on any one of these? Anything you'd like to ask? No questions? Okay, for people online, by the way, you guys can ask questions too by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any and all questions that you like. So let me just check online if we have any questions here. Okay, I don't see any questions here either. Okay, so now that you have these building blocks, oh, you have a question? Yeah, if you could get a microphone, that'd be great.
I know that in the Mahayana tradition, they're talking about emptiness, that nothing exists, like also objects. So what does Theravada say about that?
Yeah, it's not true that nothing exists because there's obviously existence. Objects exist. When the Buddha talks about emptiness, what he's talking about is to empty out the mind of the pollutions of mind, getting to an unconditioned mind. But unfortunately, some people have misunderstood that teaching and they're not understanding it in the way that the Buddha taught it. What he's talking about is getting to an unconditioned mind where the mind has been purified and it's empty of all the pollutions. He's not saying that nothing is existing because this actually conflicts with his highest, most ultimate truth. It's called dependent origination, where he teaches the 12 interlinking steps of how a being comes into existence. So he teaches that there is definitely existence. So there's a misunderstanding there for anybody who's thinking that way. You have a question, Diego? We have some more mics around too. You guys, probably there's enough of you guys and enough mics that you guys could probably all have a mic.
And I know that maybe that before for Buddha it's maybe long time, but I would say how would we see now about like some disease? Because some of these feelings like anxiety nowadays are defined as like a disease, depression, or addiction. I used to even say this way at like about drugs and alcohol, that's a choice and everything. But what about the addiction as a disease or the anxiety or depression?
Yeah, these are also misunderstandings that it's not a defect in the brain that's causing these things. It's in the mind that anybody who's experiencing anxiety or panic disorders, what they call panic disorder, ADHD, ADD, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, bulimia, anorexia, all this kind of stuff that they think is a disorder and is somehow a sickness or illness, it's actually just an untrained mind. And you can train your mind to be able to overcome that. There's actually a chapter in this book, chapter 22, where I go in and I actually teach to help people to be able to understand how the teachings of the Buddha apply to the point where you can eliminate the symptoms that are causing this. So the symptoms are 100% real that people are experiencing, but the cause is not a defective brain. It's not brain chemistry. It's an untrained mind. And when you actually train your mind, you can actually overcome any of those kinds of things. So without going into an excruciating detail, I'm just sharing that with you because when we get to the Four Noble Truths, you can see how the mind itself is causing these kinds of things. It's not any kind of biological thing or any kind of illness or sickness. Even though there's plenty of people in the world that think of it that way, this is misunderstanding that people have not understood what the mind is actually experiencing and what the Buddha taught. So once you understand it, then you can see that truth for yourself. Question?
You differentiate between the mind and like consciousness, or the brain and the mind?
Yeah,
that
these are
way.
two different things. The brain is the physical organ that is in the body. The mind is non-physical. It's non-tangible. These are two completely separate things. So what people are doing is they're tweaking brain chemistry in order to be able to change what the mind is experiencing. And you can influence the mind through tweaking brain chemistry, but you can't change the mind through tweaking brain chemistry because they're two separate things. So there's what you guys are going to see here in a moment, which is causing these discontent feelings, which is craving, desire, attachment. There's no amount of tweaking of brain chemistry that's going to eliminate that. The underlying problem that the Buddha discovered is that the mind lacks wisdom, that the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. And there's no amount of tweaking brain chemistry that's going to fix that. That's why you see that there's so many people that are having difficulties with mental health challenges, because the more that people are tweaking brain chemistry, more and more and more and more people are struggling, having difficulties. It's not giving them a true solution of how to fix it. It's just kind of keeping the mind numb rather than actually giving a real solution. So we've invented these kinds of things for a reason, because in an acute situation, like if you're familiar with psychosis, there's no amount of meditation and Four Noble Truths that's going to fix psychosis. But so you need this intervention of chemicals in order to be able to go in and adjust the brain so that now the mind can become a little bit more viable, right? But then once the mind has kind of regained a bit of stability, if you bring in the Four Noble Truths, if you bring in the Eightfold Path and meditation, an individual can create stability in their mind and get rid of all those discontent feelings. And if they would have learned as a child, like they do here in Thailand growing up, then they would have never been in that situation to begin with, right? So here in Thailand, they don't have the mental health crisis that you experience in Western countries. In Western countries, they're misunderstanding that the brain and the mind are two different things and that they actually need to be treated separately. So yeah, they're completely separate. Mhm. Yes, sir.
Is it true to say that like the self doesn't exist independently, but only like dependent on things?
It doesn't exist at all, but the mind clings to the idea that it does exist. And that's where the problems come in for the mind, that is going to experience discontentedness based on that. So you need to get to the point where your mind has realized non-self, where you let go of any kind of clinging to any of this as who you think you are as a person. There's something called the 5 aggregates or the 5 criteria that makes a living being, and your mind will cling to these, wanting them to be permanent and clinging on to them. And the mind will think that this is who you are as a person. And as long as your mind does that, you can't get to complete peace and complete joy. So there is no self. None whatsoever. But the mind's conditioning, what the mind is believing and thinking is true, is that there is a self. And that's the conflict that the mind has in the certain situation where someone says something agreeable or disagreeable about this body. Then that's where you experience discontentedness, either conditioned pleasant feelings or painful feelings based on whether someone says something agreeable or disagreeable. And you need to get to the point where your mind doesn't do that. And that's how you ultimately train your mind to get to the point of realizing non-self.
So the body exists and the mind exists, but the combination of both that we call self does not exist?
Correct. There is a body, there is a mind, and they've come together for this existence. We call that a person or a human being, but that's not who you are as a person, right? So there is a body, there is a mind, they've come together for this existence, but it's when the mind adopts the concept or the idea that this is who you are that you're setting yourself up for discontentedness. Because if somebody says something agreeable or disagreeable to you, you'll become discontent, either pleasant feelings or painful feelings. You need to get to the point where you understand that there is a body here, there is a mind here, and you need to take care of it, but don't cling to it as who you think you are as a person. So for example, I can understand that I'm fulfilling this role of being a Buddhist teacher. That's what I'm doing. I'm sharing the teachings of the Buddha. So somebody might say, that is a Buddhist teacher. But my mind doesn't have to adopt that identity, right? I don't have to adopt the identity that I am a Buddhist teacher, right? Because now when you're out and about and somebody says, all Buddhist teachers are lovely and kind and warm and gentle, Okay, that's their opinion, but that's not who I am. That's not what my mind has as who I am as a person. But then it's only a matter of time before someone says something degrading and disparaging about Buddhist teachers. And now when they say those things, okay, they're not talking about me because there's no me here, right? They're just talking about their idea of Buddhist teachers. And that's through their own experiences and their own craving and their own clinging, their own judgment of other people. And I don't have to identify who I am as a person through the role that I'm fulfilling. Because even though I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life, it's not permanent. I'm not going to be doing it permanently because at some point this being's going to die. Right? So you need to get to the point where you don't cling to any of this as who you think you are as a person. That's the training that you're going to need to employ. And there's more details for you. When we get to the ego, and we talk about that as part of this course, you'll be able to understand it more because this personal existence view is part of the mind's ego. Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't see any questions online. Okay, so now that you guys are starting to understand the three universal truths as building blocks to understand the Four Noble Truths, there's just one more building block to teach you, and then we can talk about the Four Noble Truths. So here, this is craving, desire, attachment, wants and expectation, clinging, longing, yearning, the mind chasing after the objects of its affection, thinking that the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide lasting satisfaction. So the mind will chase it and chase it and chase it. It's almost like an unquenchable thirst that the mind has. It thinks that something external is going to provide lasting satisfaction, so it will chase after it. It's kind of like the mind thinks, what do I need to be happy? More money. That'll fix everything. Let me get some more money. And now the mind will chase after that, right? And then you'll say, what do I need to be happy? Oh, a new boyfriend and a girlfriend. That'll fix everything. Let me get that. And now your mind will chase after that. Or, I know what'll make me happy. Let me go to Thailand. Let me go there. That'll fix everything. And now you chase after that and you get really excited about those things, right? So if you've ever been in the mall and you felt your mind pulling towards something, maybe it was like a new pair of shoes or a new phone or a new video game. And your mind was just like, if I can just get that thing, everything will be perfect in my life. And your mind's longing, yearning for it. That's what a craving, desire, attachment is. Not the object itself, right? So the craving, desire, attachment isn't the phone. That's not the craving, desire, attachment. The craving, desire, attachment is the way that the mind's longing, yearning for the phone. Do you guys know what I'm talking about here? Have you experienced this? Yeah? Okay. So now we have the building blocks that we need in order to be able to understand the Four Noble Truths. This is where you can understand the problem in the mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward in a way that you can independently verify it. So this first noble truth is explaining the problem that the Buddha discovered. Everyone in the unenlightened state will experience discontentedness, those conditioned feelings. Pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. They're based on some condition that the mind can't be permanently peaceful and joyful in the unenlightened state because it's going up and down and up and down and up and down. It's only a matter of time before you become annoyed or frustrated about something, right? You have some peacefulness and joy here and there, but it's only a matter of time before you become annoyed or frustrated, right? That's the problem that each unenlightened being is experiencing. Then the second noble truth is explaining the cause of this problem. Discontentedness is caused by our own cravings, desires, attachments, because the mind wants everything to be permanent when everything in the world is impermanent. I'm going to say that a couple of times and give you some examples to help you understand. The discontentedness, those conditioned feelings, pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. They're being caused by craving, desire, attachment, the mind longing, yearning, and chasing after the objects of your affection. The mind wants things to be permanent, but yet the world around you is all impermanent. It's constantly changing. So here's some examples. Think about a boyfriend or girlfriend that you got together with. When you guys first got together, you were probably so happy. You were so excited. This person's showing you affection. They're calling and checking in on you. Maybe they're inviting you to dinner, to the movies. Maybe you're going to the park, taking nice walks together. Maybe you're having wonderful conversations. Maybe you're even having intimate contact. And you have all these pleasant feelings, so excited, right? But then over time, the relationship deteriorates, and now you guys break up. And when you break up, you're angry or sad or frustrated, or maybe you're lonely or bored, or you're missing this person. This isn't your love that's causing this. This is the mind holding on and craving permanence. As long as this person's in your life, your mind's getting what you want and what you expect. So you get a certain amount of pleasant feelings from that. But when you guys break up, your mind's experiencing impermanence, but it's craving permanence. It's wanting this person to be in your life permanently, and your mind's not getting what it wants. So therefore it's angry, it's sad, it's frustrated, it's lonely, it's bored because of the mind's longing, yearning, craving this permanence. You can see this if you've had someone close to you die, like mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or brothers or sisters, right? As long as they're alive, the mind's getting what it wants. But when they die, the mind's not getting what it wants. It's experiencing this impermanence, and now you might grieve or have sorrow or sadness. It's not your love that's causing that. It's the mind holding on and craving permanence. Here's some other examples that don't involve relationships. Maybe you'll be able to see this more clearly. Think about if you had a new car. And you bought this new car and you saved up your money for this car, so proud of this car. And you drove this car off the parking lot and you parked it at a store. And you were so happy with this new car, so excited. And you went into the store, and when you came out, there's a scratch on your car. And you get angry, you get frustrated. It's not the scratch that's causing that. And it's not the person who scratched your car. What's causing the anger and frustration there is the craving for permanence, that you want this car to look permanently beautiful, when in reality it's not possible, because this car's, the paint's going to fade, the tires are going to need to be changed, the upholstery is going to get ripped and torn. It's only a matter of time before this car deteriorates because it's impermanent, right? But the mind is craving this permanence, and that's what's causing the mind to be discontent. It can only be happy if the mind's getting what it wants and what it expects. But because you live in an impermanent world, you can't get that, right? So the mind is craving this permanence. So you need to be able to see this for yourself. You can't believe what it is that I'm sharing with you, because what I'm teaching you is that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. What people typically believe is that it's other people that are causing their feelings. They will tend to blame other people for the feelings that they're experiencing. When you don't understand the second noble truth, what you will tend to do is you'll tend to push people away out of your life, or you'll push a situation away. This is called aversion, where you think that this person is causing your anger and frustration, and you push them out of your life. You might have done this with people where you've pushed away friends or family out of your life. The second thing you'll do, if you don't understand the second noble truth, is you'll be bitter and harsh and hostile to people through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. It's almost like an animal growling and roaring at another animal. It's like trying to fear them into doing things your way. Or the third thing you'll do when you don't understand the second noble truth is you'll tend to put your expectations on people, trying to pressure them into doing things your way. The mind's got this little bubble that it's trying to live in, and it wants everybody to do things my way. And if they don't do things my way, I'm going to push them out, right? Or I'm going to be bitter, harsh, and hostile to them and try to fear them to do it my way. Or I'm going to put expectations on them and try to pressure them to do it my way. This is the mind trying to get its cravings fulfilled, not realizing that that anger and frustration is coming from your own mind. So you might be pushing people away, being bitter, harsh, and hostile to them, or putting expectations on people. And people might be doing this to you too. And you can't live harmoniously with all people this way, because there's only one person in the world that actually does things your way 100% of the time. Do you know who this person is that does things your way 100% of the time? I think you know, right? You guys know who this person is, right? So if you can only be happy when people do things your way, you can only be happy when you're by yourself. And you probably have difficulties doing that sometimes, right? You're the only person who does things your way 100% of the time, right? So you're going to experience people doing things differently. So you need to be able to independently verify this. Don't believe what I'm sharing with you, that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. Take a recent situation, because that was the intellectual part, right? Let's move into the reflection. Take a recent situation where you've been angry or sad or frustrated. You might be able to have a breakthrough today to being able to see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. Look at that situation with these fresh eyes. Because at that time, you might have been trying to blame other people for what you were experiencing. That's typically what the mind does. But look at that situation with these fresh eyes. What was it that you wanted? What were you expecting? What were you longing, yearning for? And if you would have gotten it, you would have been happy. But because you didn't get what you wanted, your mind was angry or sad or frustrated or some other discontent feeling. If you can see this, you can have a breakthrough to being able to see that it's your own mind causing these feelings. Because if you keep thinking it's other people that are causing these feelings, you'll keep pushing them away. You'll be bitter, harsh, and hostile to them, and you'll put expectations on them, and you won't be able to live with all beings harmoniously. But if you can see that it's your own mind causing these feelings, then you can actually implement a solution. Right? So the second noble truth is helping you to be able to see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. And if you need help to be able to see this, let me know when we get to the question period, and I will help you, because I've had plenty of students over the years that needed help with this. I'll just give you one example. I had this student contact me one time and they said, "David, I need your help." I said, "Okay, what's going on?" They said, "Well, I know that you teach that it's my mind that's causing these feelings, but I'm sure it's my wife. And I need your help so that I can see this." And I was like, "All right, well, what's going on?" They said, "Well, I went to work the other day and my house looked beautiful. And when I came home after a hard day of work, she had this craft project all over the house. And when I walked in, I got frustrated. I got angry. How did I cause this? I wasn't even there. She's the one who messed up the house. Didn't she cause me to be angry?" And I said, "No, it was your own mind, that your mind was craving permanence. You were expecting your house to look exactly the same when you came home as when you went to work. The only thing you're experiencing here is change. That's it, right? So when it goes from sun to rain and someone's angry or frustrated, the only thing that's happened there is change. There's no other person even involved, right? Or if your bank account balance goes from here to here and you're angry or frustrated, there's no other person even involved. It's just change. That's all that's happening. So one of the ways to say this is that the mind craves permanence. Another way to say it is that the mind does not like impermanence. It doesn't like change in the unenlightened state. If you look at your life, when things were changing for you, those were some of the most difficult and challenging times in your life. When you were changing living locations, when you were changing jobs and occupations, when your relationships were changing, that was the hardest times for you in your life because your mind was craving permanence. It was struggling and having difficulties there. So the way to say this is, yes, that the mind craves permanence, or that the mind does not like impermanence. It doesn't like change. So what you need to be able to do is train your mind to let go and not allow it to crave permanence. That's what the third noble truth is explaining to you, that the elimination of discontentedness is possible by eliminating craving, desire, attachment, where your mind's not longing, yearning, and chasing after the objects of your affection. And sometimes when I say this, people say, well, wouldn't my mind swing to the other side where it's dull and lethargic and lazy? Well, it could, but that's not what the Buddha is teaching you. That's the two extremes that the unenlightened mind can see very well, is either chasing, or swinging to the other side where you're dull and lethargic. There's this middle way that you can gradually pursue your goals, objectives, or interests through wise decisions. So your mind, when it lets go, that's where you have your peace and your joy. So you can verify this too. Because think back again to that boyfriend or girlfriend. When you guys broke up, you were angry, you were frustrated, you were lonely or bored, or you were missing that person. But at some point, your mind let go. You were like, you know what? If he wants to be with someone else, so be it. And your mind let go. And that's where your peace and your joy came back. Or you know what? If she wants to live in a different part of the world, okay, so be it. And you let go. And that's where your peace and your joy came back. Right? So when your mind lets go, that's where the peace and joy is. But your mind doesn't know how to do that because it's untrained. And that's where the fourth noble truth comes in. The path to eliminating discontentedness is the Eightfold Path. This is the complete perfect plan that's going to guide you in training your mind to let go, eliminating craving, desire, attachment. But it all starts with right view. Having right view is to understand that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. It's your own craving, desire, attachment. Wrong view would be to blame other people. As long as you're blaming other people for the feelings that you're experiencing, you'll never get to enlightenment, because that's not the true cause of what's producing it. You'll just keep pushing people away, being bitter, harsh, and hostile to them, or putting expectations on them and trying to pressure them to do things your way. But when you have right view, you'll understand wisely that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, and now you'll apply the solution that the Buddha taught, and you'll actually fix it. So that's why the teachings of the Buddha start with right view. Because why would you ever do anything on the path to enlightenment if it was everybody else that was causing these feelings? The teachings of the Buddha are this self-help program. It's this inner work, this inner growth, this inner development to be able to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt ever again. But what's hurting you is inside your own mind. It's not the outside world, but that's what people will firmly believe in the unenlightened state, because their mind lacks wisdom. They just don't understand that it's their own mind that's causing these feelings. So I'm going to pause here and see if you guys have questions about the Four Noble Truths before we move on, because this is a very important teaching to be able to grasp, to be able to establish right view. So do you guys have any questions on the Four Noble Truths? No questions here? Okay, I don't see any online either. Okay, so once you establish right view and you can see that it's your own mind causing these feelings based in craving, desire, attachment, then it's time to move on to right intention. Some people translate this as right thinking or right thought. Okay, so right intention is here with the words of the Buddha. It's three things. In what, monks, is right intention? The intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will, the intention of harmlessness. This, monks, is called right intention. So he's teaching three things here: renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness. What renunciation is to be willing to let go of your false ideas, false beliefs, false opinions, and false views, and your unwholesomeness. Because in the unenlightened state, you'll have a certain amount of unwholesome moral conduct, where you're being bitter and harsh and hostile to people. You're speaking in ways that is unwise. You might be even causing harm through your actions or your livelihood. You need to be willing to let all that stuff go. Because right now, if your mind currently experiences anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other feelings, there's a certain lack of wisdom that your mind has. Your mind's clinging to certain beliefs, certain false views and opinions, and you need to be willing to renunciate that or let it go, right? Essentially, you need to keep an open mind. One of the very first beliefs that you need to eliminate is the belief that other people are causing you to be angry. If you continue to hold on to that, you'll never get to enlightenment, right? So the way that this works is you're not bringing in new beliefs in order to get rid of your old beliefs. You're bringing in wisdom. When you bring in wisdom and you've independently verified something and you see that it conflicts with something you've believed your entire life, you need to be willing to let go of that, right? So this is one of the first ones that you need to eliminate. That it's not other people that are causing you to be angry or frustrated. So you need to renunciate your false beliefs, opinions, and views, as well as your unwholesomeness. If you weren't willing to practice the intention or the thinking or the thought of renunciation, you're just going to hold on to everything that you currently think about the world, and you're going to be utterly confused and continue to experience discontentedness. Then there's this intention of non-ill will. What ill will is animosity, bitterness, anger, hatred, and all the lesser versions like frustration and irritation and annoyance. The opposite of that is non-ill will, because whenever you see a double negative in English, that's a positive, right? So non-ill will is the same as goodwill. You need to have the intention or the thinking or the thought of goodwill, which is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. This is loving kindness. You're going to need to cultivate this because you probably don't have this 100% in your mind at all times, because sometimes you get angry and frustrated at different people and you may even wish harm on them. That's the opposite of what the Buddha is teaching you here. You're going to need to transform that. Then there's the intention of harmlessness, where you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm to others. Because whenever you put out harm, harm is going to come back to you. Now, you just heard me share that it's your own mind that causes its discontentedness. That's true about other people too. People might blame you for their anger and their frustration, but you're not causing that. It's other people that are causing their own anger and frustration. You can't cause someone to be angry and frustrated, but you can cause them harm. Causing someone harm is to cause harm to their physical body, to their material possessions, or their reputation. If you cause harm to someone's physical body, their material possessions, or their reputation, they're going to be potentially interested in causing you harm back. Harm's going to come back to you, right? So you need to get to the point where you're disinterested in causing harm to others. Because anytime you put out harm through your speech, your actions, or your livelihood, that harm is going to come back to you. So you need to eliminate that from the mind, where you can practice the intention or the thinking or the thought of harmlessness, where you're disinterested in causing harm. Because how could you ever get to a peaceful and joyful life if you keep experiencing this harm coming back to you over and over and over and over again? So in order to break this cycle, you're going to need to eliminate the harm that you're causing. And that starts with this right intention of harmlessness. Okay? So now what I'll do is I'll just kind of summarize this a little bit for you guys. Is there's right view, which is the Four Noble Truths. Understanding that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, that it's craving, desire, attachment, the mind's longing, yearning. You're going to need to accept responsibility and accountability for your own feelings. That's the intellectual understanding and the reflection that you've done today. But now the practice of right view is that you're going to need to start looking inward. Whenever your mind is angry or frustrated, like you're checking into an airport and you think your flight's leaving in an hour, and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Sorry, ma'am. You can't check in right now. Your flight's delayed. You're not leaving for another 3 hours." Right? And you're noticing the anger coming up. Instead of sitting in the waiting area, blaming the airline company, thinking that they're the problem, start looking inward. Start being reflective and introspective. What am I craving? What am I longing, yearning for? I want to get to that mango and sticky rice in Thailand. That's what it is. I'm longing, yearning for that mango and sticky rice. I just can't wait to get that taste on my tongue, right? That's the mind's craving, right? So you need to be able to look inward, that it's not the airline company that's causing your anger. It's just impermanence. There's a weather issue. There's a maintenance issue. There's a crew issue. If you travel enough, you're going to meet with a delay. It's only a matter of time because the world is impermanent, right? So you need to be practicing right view where you accept responsibility and accountability for your own feelings, not blaming those on other people. Then there's right intention, which is the intention of renunciation, where you're willing to let go, give up your false ideas, false beliefs, false opinions and views, and let go of your unwholesomeness, where your mind is willing to let go of the unwholesome moral conduct that you're currently engaged in. Then you're going to need to have the intention or the thinking or the thought of non-ill will or loving kindness, goodwill towards all beings, and the intention of harmlessness, where you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm. And this is something that you're going to need to cultivate over time. You can't just snap your fingers and go outside and start doing this right now today. It's going to take you time. And that's what the rest of this path is going to help you with, to be able to understand how to cultivate this. That's what the moral conduct and the mental discipline section is going to teach you. So do you guys have any questions on the wisdom section? Anything you'd like to ask? No questions? Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a little break for about 20 minutes, 15 minutes. And when we come back at 11 o'clock, I'm going to continue to go through this, where I'm going to help you understand the moral conduct section and mental discipline section. So I'll start over there with this right speech at 11 o'clock. So enjoy your break, and I'll see you guys afterwards. Okay. So thank you for your questions, and I'll see you guys after break. Okay, guys, I'm going to continue on here with the rest of the Eightfold Path because what we learned prior to break is right view, where it's the mind itself that's causing these feelings. And when you understand that it's the mind itself that's causing these feelings, you might start looking at your moral conduct and you realize, like, oh my goodness, all the times I've ever been angry and hostile and bitter and harsh to people, it was my mind causing that all along. Ever since we were kids, it was our own mind that was causing these feelings. Like we went to mommy and daddy and we asked for chocolate and ice cream and they gave it to us and we were so happy and excited with that. Well, eventually when they said, no, you can't have chocolate and ice cream, and we were angry and frustrated, that was our mind causing that itself because we wanted that chocolate and ice cream, right? And we could only be happy if we got the chocolate and ice cream. So your entire life, and I'm sure you've been in knockdown, drag out fights before with people trying to adamantly convince them that what they were doing was causing you to be angry and they have to stop doing what they're doing or else you're going to get angry. I'm sure you've been in that situation, but it was your own mind that was causing those feelings. That's not to say that the other person wasn't doing something unwise, because they could have truly been doing something unwise, but it was your own mind that was craving permanence, that you wanted everybody to do it this way. So when you start understanding this, that it's your own mind, you understand that it's really unwise to be bitter and harsh and hostile to people. So you need to learn moral conduct to be able to change what it is that you're actually doing. So the Buddha teaches you moral conduct as part of this Eightfold Path and as part of others' teachings so that it can help you eliminate craving, desire, attachment. Because all your unwise moral conduct is coming from your craving, desire, attachment. It's the mind longing, yearning, and wanting people to be a certain way. That's why there's that harsh and bitter and hostile speech to people, because your mind's trying to almost fear them into doing things a certain way. So by changing your moral conduct, it'll actually change what's going on in your mind. So I'm going to teach you guys this. But when you learn the moral conduct from the Buddha, it's important to understand what he's teaching you is the natural law of karma. He's teaching you this cause and effect, or action and result. Now, some people call this karma. You might have heard that before. That's the Sanskrit version of the word. The Pali language, they use the word karma. So people who study the original words of the Buddha in Pali, they will tend to use the word karma. If this translated to just one English word, I would just use that word because it'd be easier for everyone, but it doesn't. So I still need to use this word. What it means is cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions. It's your life, it's your decisions, and it's your results. And whenever you make decisions wisely, you will experience wholesome karma, or wholesome results. And when you make decisions unwisely, you will experience unwholesome karma, or unwholesome results. It's nothing mystical or magical. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. It's not about punishments and rewards. There's no being or entity that's overseeing this, choosing and deciding who gets what. It's literally the results of your decisions. It's like a sequence of events. And when you treat people wisely, you're going to experience wholesome results. When you treat people unwisely, you're going to experience unwholesome results. So the Buddha is going to teach you this moral conduct as a way to help you eliminate the pollutions of your mind and get to a point where you're making wise decisions about how you interact with people, to eliminate craving, desire, attachment in the mind, because that's what's producing these discontent feelings. So these aren't rules. They're not commandments. It's important for you to not ever view it that way. He's showing you the cause and effect between the decisions that you make about how you interact with people and what you experience coming back to you. So, for example, this first one, right speech. Here's what the Buddha shares. In what monks is right speech? Refraining from lying, refraining from slander, refraining from harsh speech, refraining from frivolous speech. This is called right speech. So these are 4 types of ways that you could speak, and it's going to produce wholesome results for you if you speak in the way that the Buddha is teaching you here, which is refraining from lying, because he's teaching you how to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. Remember the Four Noble Truths. He's explaining the Eightfold Path is what's going to guide you in how to do that, because when you're lying, you have a craving. There's a craving there. The mind wants something, and it feels like if it tells the truth, it's not going to get what it wants. So it lies in order to try to get what it wants. But the problem is that people discover your lies, and now they consider you to be untrustworthy, undependable, and unreliable, and it damages your relationships. It produces unwholesome karma for you when you're actually lying. So you'd like to get to the point where you're always telling the truth, because if you've done a lot of lying, you know that when we were children, we had to keep our lies straight, right? We had to figure out what did we say to mom? What do we say to dad? What do we say to brothers and sisters and grandma and grandpa? And it was very taxing on the mind to try to keep all those lies straight, right? How can you get to peace and joy to this enlightened mental state if you're doing that, right? You're going to need to get to the point where you just speak the truth to everybody, and it's so much easier. Then you'd like to refrain from slander. What slander is like gossip, where you're damaging someone's reputation. Whenever you're causing harm through something like slander or gossip, it's coming from craving, desire, attachment. There's anger in the mind. There's ill will towards that person. And now the mind is going to experience unwholesome results as part of that. The way the mind thinks is like you're kind of walking into a dark room and everybody's got a candle, and the mind thinks, if I put out everybody else's candle, my candle will shine brighter, right? But the way you've got to think about this is that we're all standing in a dark room. We would like everybody's candle to shine bright. No need to put out anybody else's candle, right? But that's what the mind does when it's slandering and gossip. It's degrading and diminishing other people to try to make yourself look better. But it actually makes you look bad because you're actually gossiping and slandering and diminishing other people. So you'd like to get rid of that out of your mind where you're not doing that. At the height of this, the cause and effect of the natural law of karma is if you're gossiping and slandering about people, you can be murdered. There's been plenty of people that have experienced that. You can see it in the news. You'll see like a news reporter, they'll go onto the news and they'll gossip and slander someone. And next thing you know, they're dead. Remember, the teachings of the Buddha aren't explaining to you the way the world should be. He's explaining to you the way the world is. And the way the world is that if you cause harm to someone, their physical body, their material possessions, or their reputation, then harm is going to come back to you. At the least, if you're gossiping and slandering about people, when you have your back turned, those people are going to be gossiping and slandering about you. So if you're interested in people not gossiping and slandering about you, you're going to need to eliminate your own gossip and slander. This will help you eliminate craving, desire, attachment. Then the Buddha teaches you to refrain from harsh speech. What harsh speech is your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. How you choose to speak to people is going to really matter. It's going to produce certain results for you. So if you pay attention to your tone, your tempo, and your word choice, and you speak gentle, this is going to produce wholesome results for you. Whereas if you're speaking harshly, it's actually going to produce unwholesome results. So you're going to need to look at the different languages that you speak, whether it's English or any other languages that you speak, and you're going to need to learn how to speak gentle based on your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. So this will help to produce wholesome results for you when you're interacting with people. Then there's frivolous speech. What frivolous speech is have you ever heard of, maybe it's called idle chatter sometimes, where somebody's just talking? Maybe you've been this person or someone you know has been this person, where it's just like yada, 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 yada. It's not really a conversation. It's like they're broadcasting to you. And you might be like, oh my gosh, when are they going to just stop talking? Like, I thought this was a conversation. Like, what's going on here? Right? So if you go around with frivolous speech, that means you're speaking unbeneficially, unpurposeful. There's not a purpose behind your speech. There's just an underlying craving to just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And eventually, if you do this enough, people are just going to tune you out. They're not going to be interested in talking with you. You're going to be uninfluential with the people around you. So you would like to have a conversation where you can be beneficial and purposeful in your speech. So this is the first level of detail with right speech, where the Buddha is teaching you to eliminate lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech, because this is helping you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, and produce wholesome results in your day-to-day relationships. Once you get your arms around that and you're doing well with that, you would like to move deeper into this teaching called the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. Because remember, the Eightfold Path is a core central teaching that everything else plugs into. So there's a teaching called the 5 factors of well-spoken speech that plugs in here, that's going to give you more details on how to speak wisely. The Buddha teaches you to speak at the proper time. What you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. What speaking at the proper time is to make sure you're not interrupting people. If you're interrupting people, there's an underlying craving there that the mind is just can't wait to jump in there and start talking, right? That's the craving, desire, attachment. And you don't like it when people interrupt you. So if you went around interrupting people, then you're going to have difficulties and struggles because people are going to get angry and bitter and hostile and harsh. You're not causing that, but nonetheless, it's still happening in this environment. And now it's going to have difficulties in that situation. And people are going to just not be interested in talking with you over time. Also, speaking at the proper time is to make sure your mind is prepared to talk. If you're angry, if you're frustrated, if you're agitated or annoyed, and you start communicating and talking, the only thing that's going to come out is anger and hostility. And you can see where you've done that. It's broken relationships, or you've lost a job, or some other thing like this. That's the natural law of karma. So you would like to be sure that you're speaking at the proper time, that your mind is calm and peaceful prior to speaking. And then the third aspect of speaking at the proper time is to make sure the other person's mind is calm. If they're angry and frustrated, it's not the proper time to talk. So you'd like to make sure you're speaking at the proper time, because that's going to give you the best opportunity to have a wonderful conversation and do whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish in that conversation. Speaking the truth, that's handled up here, where the Buddha talks about eliminating lying. Not only are you interested in eliminating a deliberate lie, but you're also interested in not spreading conspiracy theories or unfounded information, right? Like if you're out there just like, oh yeah, somebody told me this and somebody told me that, and I heard this and I heard that. Well, you haven't really investigated it for yourself to know what's true or false. You would like to make sure that whatever you're sharing is accurate and truthful, because then people will get used to you being truthful. They'll consider you to be a true speaker, reliable, dependable, a person to be relied on. And that's what it is that you're looking to cultivate in your life. So you'd like to not only eliminate deliberate lying, but you also make sure that before you say something that you know that it's actually true, that you've investigated it and know it to be true. Then you'd like to speak gently. That's covered up here, where you pay attention to your tone, your tempo, and your word choice, right? Saying things like sir and ma'am and please and thank you. These are all great ways to show that you're being polite and respectful and gentle when you're speaking with people. Then you would like to speak beneficially. This is about the method of how you speak, that you're speaking clear, concise, and precise. If you're kind of random chit-chat where you have this frivolous speech, people are just going to tune you out. So you would like to speak beneficially, where you're clear, concise, and precise in the way that you talk. Speaking beneficially isn't like there's some approved list of topics somewhere, right? And you can only talk about these specific topics. That's not what speaking beneficially is. It's about the method of how you speak, that you're clear, concise, and precise in the way that you speak. Then there's speaking with a mind of loving kindness. Loving kindness is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. You would like to wrap all your communication in a mind of loving kindness. The opposite of that would be inner hate. When you've spoken with a mind of inner hate, it's produced unwholesome results for you. You can see that in your life. So the teachings of the Buddha are something that you can independently verify and see for yourself. Because remember, you're not interested in believing any of this stuff. You need to be able to verify it. So you can take these 5 factors of well-spoken speech, and you can see in your life there were certain situations where you didn't practice these and your conversations didn't go well, and you experienced unwholesome results. Because remember, these are the natural laws of existence. They're affecting you whether you're aware of them or not. So you can take a recent situation where the conversation didn't go well, and you can see you weren't speaking at the proper time, or you weren't speaking the truth, or you weren't speaking gently, or you weren't speaking beneficially, or you weren't speaking with a mind of loving kindness. And that's why that conversation didn't go well for you. But then you can look at the flip side of this to be able to see the other side, to independently verify this for yourself, because you've had conversations that have gone well. Maybe at break time, you had a conversation with somebody, right? It went well for you because you were using the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. You and the other person were speaking at the proper time. What you said is true. It was gentle. It was beneficial. And it was with a mind of loving kindness, right? So these are the 5 factors that you would like to integrate into your life more and more and dial this in. Understanding that it's going to be most challenging for you in situations where you have close relationships. your parents, your siblings, your life partner, your children, people like this that you're really close to, this will be a lot more challenging for you. People usually think it's the other person that is the problem, but it's just that your mind has more attachment in those relationships. That's why it's more challenging for you. So when we get to the mental discipline section, I'm going to teach you how to make this easier for yourself. But here, what the Buddha is doing is giving you the wisdom of what would be wise in terms of these natural laws and how you communicate with people. Because the Buddha calls this right speech, but we might think of it as right communication, because we have many more things than just speech, right? Like if you went to a job interview and you knocked it out of the park and you did really, really well, those people might be interested in hiring you, right? But now they go look at your social media and they see you're bitter and harsh and hostile, you're probably not going to get the job, right? So you would like all your communication to be using the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, whether it's text, chat, email, social media posts. So for example, if you're really angry and frustrated and you're going over to your keyboard and you're pounding on your keyboard, that's not the proper time to communicate. So maybe you hit save on that email instead of send. Because once you send it out into the world, it's producing unwholesome results and it's going to come back to you, right? So go ahead. If you need to pound on your keyboard, pound on your keyboard. You're not causing any harm potentially unless you're damaging the keyboard, right? But hit save. Don't hit send, because that's putting it out into the world and now it's going to produce unwholesome results. Come back 3 hours later, 2 or 3 days later, look at that email and see, is it really something you would like to send out? Does it really make sense to send that email? Right? Because you need to contrast it with the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. All right. So here, what we're talking about is we're talking about developing barami. This is a Thai word. Barami. What barami means is the one who people listen to. Here in Thailand, if you live in a certain village, there's usually some village elders that people know are very wise, and people will tend to go to them for advice because they're very successful in life. And when I say they're successful in life, I don't mean necessarily financially successful. What I mean is that they have harmonious relationships. That's what it means to be successful in life. Anybody can go make money. It doesn't take very much effort and work. I mean, you can go figure out how to make some money. That's not too difficult. Anybody can make a bunch of money, but it takes someone really wise to have harmonious relationships. So here in Thailand, if someone has really harmonious relationships, it's because they're practicing the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. And people know that. So they will go to those people and ask for help and advice and guidance about how to conduct their life in certain ways. So if you're interested in being influential and helpful to the people around you, whether it's in your personal life or professional life, you're going to need to establish barami. This means the one who people listen to, right? So if you're interested in being the one who people listen to, you're going to need to establish barami. And you do this over multiple months and years of practicing the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. And more people will be influenced by the things that you have to say, that they'll be able to come to you and ask for advice and guidance, and you'll be able to help those people. So it's practicing these 5 factors that'll help you. In this book, I have a lot of details. This first book, I have a lot of details about the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. I give examples and all these different things. So I definitely encourage you guys to get a version of this so you can see how it's described through the teachings of the Buddha. And I also give you like a little shortcut in there that obviously you need to learn what the Buddha taught, the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, because that's what's going to lead to enlightenment. But between now and then, as you're dialing in the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, there's kind of some shortcuts that you can kind of keep in mind that'll help you. You ultimately need to understand the 5 factors of well-spoken speech and practice that. But there's going to be some situations where maybe between now and the time you have the 5 factors well in your mind, that you're going to maybe be on a phone call, maybe with your mom or something like that. And you're going to notice the frustration coming up. You're not going to be able to be like, oh, mom, hold on a second. I am really getting angry here. There's these 5 factors of well-spoken speech in this book. I need to look at them. Hold on a second, right? You're not going to be able to do that, right? So you need to work on this. You need to commit it to your memory in order to be able to practice it. But between now and then, if you can remember to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, that's what you would like to be able to do. Ultimately, it comes back to the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. That's what you're going to need to learn. But if you can keep this in mind, this can help you in that pinch. Maybe you're in a business meeting and you can't quite remember what the 5 factors of well-spoken speech are. Just remember, polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. And this will really help you. But more and more, you need to dial this in. So one of the things I used to do is I used to look at the 5 factors of well-spoken speech in the morning. It just take me like a minute to kind of refresh my memory. And then I go out in my day and have my business meetings and do what it is that I was going to do. And then in the lunchtime, I would look at the 5 factors of well-spoken speech again. And I would kind of look at the meetings that I had in my mind and be like, oh man, I was interrupting that guy. I shouldn't have been doing that. I need to get better at that. So now I would kind of hone it in a little bit more. And then in the afternoon, I would really be working on speaking at the proper time, and maybe for the next several days or the next week or two. And then I would maybe even check it in the nighttime and to see what did I do in the afternoon. So you're going to need to do this to really dial it in closely. Then there's something called right action. This is the 4th factor of the Eightfold Path that's going to guide you to enlightenment. Here's the words of the Buddha. In what, monks, is right action? Refraining from taking life, refraining from taking what is not given, refraining from sexual misconduct. This is called right action. So here he's talking very general and very broad about 3 specific things. He gives you the details on these in the 5 precepts. If you haven't studied the 5 precepts using the words of the Buddha yet, you're going to need to do that. It's in chapter 7 of this first book, where I have the original words of the Buddha on the 5 precepts. If you've learned that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants, that's not the 5 precepts. That's not what the Buddha actually taught. He doesn't teach that way. That sounds like black and white. It sounds like rules and commandments. And the Buddha doesn't actually teach that way. He uses much more illuminating language than that. Here, he's using just very basic language because in the 5 precepts, he uses it the more elaborate language. So that's why you need to be able to learn that, because it plugs into the Eightfold Path. So here he's giving you 3 impactful bodily actions that you need to eliminate, because whenever you cause harm through your body, then there's going to be harm that comes to you. He's not giving you an exhaustive list. He's just giving you 3 impactful ones because you're going to need to figure out all the others. For example, he doesn't say it would be unwise to walk up to someone and punch them in the face. He doesn't say that, right? Because you need to figure that out. You can tell that if you're practicing right action, you wouldn't punch someone in the face, because the natural law of karma is they're probably going to punch you back, or they're going to pull out a gun or a knife, or their friends or their family are going to come attack you. It's only a matter of time before you experience unwholesome results from punching that person in the face. Maybe you get arrested or something like that. So the Buddha's not giving you an exhaustive list. Notice he doesn't say, it would be unwise to drag your suitcase through the aisle of a plane and run over people's feet and bump into their knees. Right? He doesn't say that because the airplanes weren't even invented 2,500 years ago. So it would have been impossible for him to come up with an exhaustive list. So you're going to need to understand that it's not causing harm through the movements of your body. So here the Buddha gives you these 3 impactful ones. And if you learn the 5 precepts, you're going to see that this sexual misconduct doesn't involve same-gender relationships. Sometimes people are like, oh, that must be same-gender relationships. No, it has nothing to do with same-gender relationships, because what he's teaching you in the 5 precepts is about having sex with minors, having sex outside of relationships that you're currently involved in, having sex against person's consent, like you're raping them or something like that, harmful sex. If there's 2 loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex, they're not causing harm to anybody. Doesn't matter what their gender is, right? If there's 2 loyal, loving, consenting adults having sex, if it's male, female, or male, female, female, they're not causing any harm. So the Buddha was aware of this because this happened during his lifetime too. We can understand through the universal truth of impermanence that there's never been a time in human history where everybody had sex with the opposite gender. That would be permanence. And we don't live in that world. Ever since the beginning of humanity, people have been having sex with the opposite gender, but they've been having sex with the same gender too. That's impermanence. That's the impermanent nature of the world. So if you're someone who has same gender relationships, or you know someone who does, they're not causing any harm. Right? You're not causing any harm. They're not causing any harm. So here, you're going to need to study this in more detail. to be able to understand what sexual misconduct is. But this is one of the ways that I help you guys to be able to see just how wise this individual was 2,500 years ago. He already understood that same gender relationships don't cause harm, right? We have plenty of people in the world today that don't even understand that, right? They haven't cultivated that wisdom. But he understood 2,500 years ago that this was the truth. So you'll see that in his teachings, okay? Then you've got right livelihood. A livelihood is how you choose to sustain your life. If you choose to sustain your life off of causing harm to others, then this harm is going to come back to you. So the Buddha gives you guidance on how to conduct your livelihood in a way that's going to not cause harm. So in the Eightfold Path, he just says something very general. In what, monks, is right livelihood? Here, monks, the noble disciple, having given up wrong livelihood, keeps himself by right livelihood. So that's just very general and very broad. But you need to go look in the other parts of his teachings to be able to see what he's actually teaching on this important topic. So what I'm going to teach you is called the first fold of purification. The Buddha has two folds, two levels of purification for your livelihood. So I'm going to teach you the first level, and then I'll show you where to get the second level here in a moment, okay? So here, he's teaching you about the types of livelihood that could cause harm. And if you have this type of livelihood, you're sustaining your life off of causing harm to others. So therefore, harm's going to come to you. So if you have business in weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, or poisons, this is actually going to cause harm. And you're now sustaining your life off of causing that harm, and harm's going to come to you. But remember, these teachings are to be independently verified. It's not rules. It's not commandments. He's helping you to see the natural law of karma. So let me show you how to do that with something like this. Let's just take one of these, like the substances that cause heedlessness. If I was standing on the street corner selling substances like heroin, crystal methamphetamine, or things like this into the neighborhood, I'm causing harm to this community because I'm sustaining my life off of causing harm to others. They're going out stealing to bring me money. They're going out to rob people and maybe sell their bodies. Maybe they're using their money instead of using it for rent. They're giving it to me because they're addicted to this substance, right? So I'm standing on the street corner causing harm. So that means harm is going to come to me. That's why standing on the street corner, I can easily get beat up. I can get murdered. I can get robbed, right? I can get arrested. I can get addicted to these substances myself, right? This is all the harm that's going to come to me as a result of choosing to cause harm, right? So you can verify all of this. Now, remember, the natural law of karma, it's functioning at a much higher level than the human laws, because most places in the world, it's illegal to stand on the street corner and sell crystal methamphetamine into the community. But there's some places in the world where you could actually do that legally and they wouldn't arrest you for that. But you're still going to experience the harms, right? So for example, like the country that I grew up in, they're not going to arrest me for working at a liquor store. If I decided I'd like to be a cashier at a liquor store, they're not going to arrest me for that. But if you understand the natural law of karma, you might decide that it's very unwise to do that, because those are the places they get robbed, right? People come in, they want money or they want the alcohol, right? And they're going to potentially beat you up. People have gotten murdered in those situations. At the very least, you're going to be dealing with intoxicated people from time to time as they're coming in to be able to purchase alcohol. And how can you get to a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life if you're constantly having to deal with intoxicated people? So the Buddha is teaching you as a way to help you understand this natural law of karma, which functions at a much higher law or much higher level than the human laws. The human laws are imperfect, right? They're the laws of society. That's what humans created, right? This natural law of karma functions at a much higher level. So you're going to need to get in touch with that and practice that. And when you're practicing the natural law of karma, you'll never have a problem with your government. It just won't happen. Okay? Then as you're practicing this, where you're not performing a livelihood that is causing harm, the Buddha then teaches you how to function in your livelihood in a way that doesn't cause harm, so that way you can be very successful in your livelihood. He teaches you to eliminate scheming, flattering, hinting, belittling, and pursuing gain with gain. If you're doing these types of things, it's going to cause harm, so therefore harm is going to come to you. So for example, if I was a mayor of a town and I'm not causing any harm by being the mayor of this town. But if I'm scheming, if I'm corrupt, if I'm doing backhanded deals, eventually people are going to find out about this. 10, 15 years into my career, they're not going to be willing to reelect me. And now I'm going to find it very difficult to sustain my life. So the Buddha teaches you to not scheme as part of your livelihood. He also teaches you to eliminate this flattery. What this is this is insincere comments just to get people to buy something from you. Because when you're doing business with people, people do business with people. They don't do business with businesses. So if you're flattering people, you're just giving insincere comments in order to get people to buy something from you. You might have gone into a place and they're like, oh, you look so handsome. You look so beautiful. Wow, that shirt really brings out the colors of your eyes. You know, I've got these earrings over here that'll go really well with that shirt that you're wearing. Would you like to see those? Right? They're just trying to flatter you in order to get you to buy something. You might have felt like, ugh, this is kind of icky. I don't even want to go into the store. You might just turn around and just leave right out of the store, right? So you're not interested in just flattering people because they'll see through that, and you'll find that it's very difficult for you to be successful in your livelihood. The Buddha also teaches to eliminate hinting. What hinting is where you're not being very clear and concise in the work that you're doing. Because like if all of us were on a project team and we needed to go brief the boss on what it is that we're doing, we like to be clear and concise, and we like to be precise about what it is that we're doing. We're not interested in just hinting around and being unclear. That's not going to go very well for us. So the Buddha teaches you to be clear and concise about the work that you're doing. Then there's pursuing gain with gain. What this is where you don't really care about the work or the product, the service that you're doing. You're just out for the money. That's all that you're interested in. And if you've ever had this kind of job, you might have been really excited at the beginning because you were getting this big fat paycheck. But over time, that kind of dwindled and your craving kind of diminished and you weren't as happy anymore at this job. Maybe 3 months, 6 months in, you kind of felt like you were dragging yourself to work each day because you were just there for the paycheck. And while you were excited about that at the beginning, that's kind of faded away. And now you really don't care about the work that you're doing. So you would like to get to the point where you have enthusiasm, ambition, and motivation about the work that you're doing, that it doesn't even feel like work anymore, that you thoroughly enjoy what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and how you're providing some type of product or service to the community. There's people like that here in Thailand that you can probably encounter at different times. If you've been outside, maybe you see someone standing on the street corner selling mango and sticky rice, right? Maybe this morning they woke up, they went into their mango grove and they picked each individual little mango and they brushed it off and they put it into their basket. And now they brought it to the market and they're standing there with a big smile on their face, slicing their mangoes, right? And now they put it over top of that warm, sticky rice. They pour that coconut milk over top of it and they hand it to you with a big smile on their face. And sure, they collect their 40 baht, but it's not even about the 40 baht. It's about they just can't imagine doing anything else other than serving you that mango and sticky rice. They thoroughly enjoy it, right? So what you need to do is you need to find your mango and sticky rice. What's your mango and sticky rice? What is it that you're going to thoroughly enjoy that you can't imagine doing anything else and it doesn't even feel like work anymore? Sure, you're collecting money from it, but that's not what you're out for. You're really enjoying what it is that you're doing, right? So if you're not in that type of livelihood right now, you're going to need to find it, right? So maybe if you're in a livelihood that you don't particularly care for, you're not really enjoying it, you're going to need to maybe switch. Or maybe you're in between jobs and you're looking for a new job. So you're going to need to learn this and practice this, but there's also another level of purification here. So if you look in volume 12, chapter 14 of our book series, that's where the Buddha has the 2 levels of purification, where you can see the first and second fold of purification. So you might decide to investigate that if you're in a livelihood that you don't particularly care for, or if you're in between jobs and you'd like to find something new, that's a great place for you to look before you start going out and looking for a job, is that you read what's in there to be able to help you to be able to make a wise decision about your livelihood. Because if you're dragging yourself to work every day, how are you ever going to get to a peaceful and joyful mental state, right? You would like to really thoroughly enjoy what it is that you do each day. So this is right livelihood. So just to summarize the moral conduct section, there's right speech, which is you like to not cause harm through any of your interactions through communication, whether it's verbal, whether it's text, chat, post, emails. All of this should be harmless, where you're not causing harm. And the Buddha gives you guidance on how to do that. Remember, it's not just about speech. It's about your social media. It's about your emails. All of that needs to be harmless. Then you need to practice right action, where you're not causing harm through your bodily actions. Because anytime you cause harm, it's just going to come back to you. Then you would like to look at your livelihood and make sure that you're sustaining your life without causing harm to others, and that you get to a point where ultimately you thoroughly enjoy the work that you're doing each day, where it doesn't even feel like work, that you found your mango and sticky rice, right? And now you just can't imagine doing anything else other than that. So any questions on this moral conduct section? Yes, sir.
Did the Buddha speak specifically about same-sex relationships or just didn't refer it?
He talks about individuals who don't identify with the same gender as the body. So I haven't seen anywhere where he talks about two people of the same gender having sex, but he talks about like a person who has a male body who doesn't identify as being in the male body, and they don't have relations with the opposite gender. But he doesn't talk about the sexual act itself. So we can understand that he was well aware of this as part of his life. And we can understand that because he didn't include it in the third precept, that he understood that same gender relationships don't cause harm, because there's no harm between two loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex. You can see that for yourself.
And I'm wondering, why did he talk about sexual contact outside of relationship as a bad thing? Because it feels like a social rule which is impermanent.
Yeah, he's not talking about good or bad. That's not the way that he frames anything that he talks about. Instead, he's talking about what leads to wholesome results and what leads to unwholesome results. So if you're in a current relationship and you're having sex with that person and you choose to go outside of that relationship and have sex with someone else, well, this person's craving, desire, attachment, and your craving, desire, attachment, it's going to get triggered. So in that situation, if you're having sex outside of your relationship, you got to look at, where is the unwholesome karma? Is there any unwholesome karma in this? Well, this is why when people move outside of a relationship and they're choosing to have sex, they're still in this relationship, but they're having sex outside. You can get beat up. You can get murdered. Your property, material possessions can get destroyed. You can experience sexually transmitted diseases. You can lose your reputation in the community. This is the unwholesome karma of the unwise decision. And now you find yourself experiencing all these unwholesome results. So you can see that through your own understanding of the natural law of karma. So the Buddha is pointing to the natural law of karma and helping you to be able to see that it's unwise to go outside of an existing relationship. But you can't just sit with that and be like, okay, well, I'll just accept what the Buddha said. You need to look at it and say, if I went outside of a relationship and had sex, what's going to happen here? And those are some of the ones that I just went through of what you would experience as a result. And you can see, yes, that's unwholesome karma. And where that's coming from is the mind's craving. The mind's having a longing, yearning to have sex with multiple people. You can't be content with just one person. The mind's longing, yearning to have this pleasure of the body with multiple people. And now, because of that craving, it's going to produce unwholesome results for you, which I just ran through a bunch of them.
He spoke specifically about cheating, not about like a single person having sexual relations outside.
Yeah, he
Okay.
spells that out very clearly in multiple parts of his teachings, because you can see this truth for yourself. I don't know if you've ever done that, where you've had sex outside of relationships, but you can see where it causes difficulties and harm, and you're going to experience unwholesome karma. But if you haven't done that, that's very wise. Don't do that. That's really unwise. But if you see other people that are choosing to do that, you can see where they have difficulties and struggles. But the Buddha explains it in his teachings, because what he's doing is he's explaining this natural law of karma, of cause and effect. So you're learning it through the teachings of the Buddha intellectually. You reflect on it through your own experiences or the experiences of people around you. But then you got to move it into practice, where you make the choice to only be in one relationship at a time in terms of sexual relationship. And that's where you're going to experience the wholesome karma.
cheating, but like a single person having sexual relations with other single people,
What do you mean?
like one night.
Oh, one night stand. So the Buddha calls this unchastity, which is having sex with multiple people and bouncing around from person to person to person to person. That's where you can see that you experience potentially sexually transmitted diseases. You can see that your mind gets hooked to these encounters and it doesn't feel as pleasurable for you anymore. You can see that you have maybe even guilt and shame or fear in your mind at different times, that it's not going to be satisfying and sustaining, that your mind is just out there almost like chasing around sexual activity like an animal. And you can see that the Buddha teaches this. It's called unchastity. He teaches you to abandon this, that it's unwise to continue to allow your mind to do that. Instead, what he essentially is teaching you is to have a loyal, loving, consenting relationship with just one person. And now you can build up a wonderful life with that person, because now you can build up your Dhamma together as individuals. You can build up your Dhamma, but then as a couple, you can also have a wonderful life for yourself that you've developed for yourself. You have a question?
Did the Buddha speak on like marriage? I know that a lot of the monks don't do that, don't engage in relationships.
Yeah, he does teach about marriage, but it's not something that it's required, right? Because not everybody's going to be married. That would be permanence, right? But instead, he teaches you how to peacefully exist within a marriage, if that's what you choose to do. Really, any relationship. So that's part of our Harmony in Relationships course, where I teach people how to select a life partner so that you can have wholesome results as part of that. But yeah, he teaches extensively about those kinds of things. Okay. So now that you're starting to understand the moral conduct section, you can move on to the mental discipline, because you would find it very difficult to implement the moral conduct without the mental discipline. Because it's one thing to sit here and talk and be like, oh yeah, let's be gentle and loving and kind and warm. That's really easy to talk about. But now when you've got to go do it, it can be very challenging for you, particularly in those relationships where you're the closest. Your parents, your siblings, your life partner, your children, you'll find that to be the most challenging. So that's where the mental discipline section comes in, because you're going to need this mental discipline to train your mind to be able to implement the moral conduct. That's what's actually going to help you. So I'm going to teach you this part as well. So here's the words of the Buddha on right effort. He says, in what, monks, is right effort? Here, monks, a monk rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to prevent the arising of unarisen, evil, unwholesome mental states. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to overcome evil, unwholesome mental states that have arisen. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to produce unarisen, wholesome mental states. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to maintain wholesome mental states that have arisen, not to let them fade away, to bring them to greater growth, to the full perfection of development. This is called right effort. So he's talking about 4 things here that are right effort. And I've got them listed out here for you guys. And I'm going to use examples to help you understand what the Buddha is teaching you here. This first one, he's talking about preventing unwholesome mental states that have not arisen from arising in the mind. So there's certain unwholesome mental states that are not currently in your mind right now. And you're going to need to apply the effort to prevent those from ever coming into the mind. A great example of that is probably killing another human being. You probably have no interest in killing another human being. That's like the farthest thing from your mind right now. You're going to need to apply the effort to prevent those types of things from ever coming into your mind. Because once it comes into your mind, you could potentially act upon it, and that's going to produce all kinds of unwholesome results. So you'd like to prevent unwholesome qualities from coming into the mind by applying the effort to prevent that. Then there's abandoning unwholesome mental states that have arisen in the mind, because there's certain unwholesome mental states that are currently in your mind right now. If your mind's unenlightened, then there's going to be unwholesome mental states. By the time you get to enlightenment, your mind is completely wholesome. But in the unenlightened state, you're going to have unwholesome qualities in your mind. So for example, if you're in an existing relationship and you have a craving to have sex outside of that relationship, that's going to produce harm. It's going to produce unwholesome results for you. And if that craving is inside your mind, you're going to need to apply the effort to eliminate it and abandon it out of the mind. Or something like anger and frustration. If you're noticing that that's coming up in your mind, that's an unwholesome quality. And now when you act upon that through your speech and actions, it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. So you're going to need to apply the effort to eliminate that out of your mind. Then there's wholesome qualities that are unarisen in the mind, and you're going to need to apply the effort to arise those wholesome qualities. So there are certain wholesome qualities that you're going to find that you're going to need that aren't currently in your mind right now, that you're going to need these in order to get to enlightenment. So for example, generosity. One of the things you're going to learn about generosity is it trains your mind to let go. Because when you have craving, desire, attachment in your mind's going to have a certain amount of selfishness where your mind's holding on and you're craving things. But when you practice generosity, when you're giving and sharing with others without any expectation of anything in return, it trains your mind to let go. Well, if you find it difficult to share with others, you're going to need to apply the effort to bring this generosity into your mind because it's a wholesome quality that's not currently in your mind. Then there's maybe compassion. Compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others, where the opposite of this would be indifference, where you could care less about other people. You see someone who's maybe addicted to drugs or a homeless person, and you're like, I don't care. It's not my brother. It's not my sister. It's not my mom or dad. I don't care, right? That's indifference. That's one side of compassion. But the other side of compassion is anxiety and worry. It's like, oh my gosh, those kids don't have food. What are they going to do? And now you're worried about them all day long and maybe for multiple days, right? So coming to the middle is your compassion, where you have concern for the misfortune of others. Whether you choose to do something about it is a whole separate question, but you're going to need to cultivate this quality in your mind. And if that's a quality that's not currently in your mind, you're going to need to apply the effort to bring this into your mind. Then there's maintain wholesome mental states that have arisen, not allowing them to fade away, and work to increase their growth in the mind. There's probably certain wholesome qualities that are in your mind right now, and you're going to need to support those, encourage them. Don't allow them to fade. You're going to need to apply the effort to do that. So for example, this loving kindness. You probably have loving kindness in your mind, which is a genuine interest in seeing others be well. But it hasn't been fully developed. It hasn't been brought to full growth, full perfection, and full development. Because in certain situations, you get angry. You get bitter and hostile and harsh with people, right? That's because your loving kindness isn't fully developed yet. So in those situations where you see your mind doesn't have fully developed loving kindness, you're going to need to apply the effort to be able to cultivate that in your mind more and more. So you're going to need to apply the effort to do this. Or sympathetic joy. What sympathetic joy is the joy for others' success, even if you didn't contribute to it. This is the opposite of jealousy or envy. So in some situations, you probably have sympathetic joy, right? Like maybe someone says, hey, I'm thinking about going to Thailand. And you're like, oh, that's wonderful for you. I've been to Thailand. There's this lady that sells mango and sticky rice on the corner in Chiang Mai. You might decide to go check her out. She's got some really good mango and sticky rice, right? You're like really pleased for this person's success that they're going to Thailand, right? So in that situation, you have sympathetic joy. But maybe in another situation, like maybe you're applying for a new job at your company, maybe a new position is opened up and you and a couple of your coworkers applied for it and they get the job instead of you, right? And now you're jealous and you're envious. That's because your sympathetic joy hasn't been brought to full growth, full perfection, and full development. And now when they're walking around the office gloating and all conceited that they got this new job, you notice your jealousy is coming up. You're going to need to apply the effort to eliminate that unwholesome quality of jealousy and bring in this wholesome quality of sympathetic joy, where there's joy for other success, even if you didn't contribute to it. Okay? So this is right effort. The way that I taught this to my young son when he was really young is I taught him to kick out the unwholesome and bring in the wholesome. That's what you're doing. You need to apply the effort to do that. Okay? These are just examples. I'm using examples that I just came up with to help you guys understand what right effort is. What's wholesome and unwholesome in your mind is going to be unique to you, right? And that's where the next factor comes in. You wouldn't be able to practice right effort without the next one. The next one is what's going to help you to be able to see what is wholesome and what is unwholesome that is in your mind. So this is called right mindfulness. So again, I'm going to read this to you and then I'll teach it to you. The Buddha says, "In what, monks, is right mindfulness? Here, monks, a monk resides reflecting on body as body, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on feelings as feelings, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on mind as mind, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on mental objects as mental objects, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. This is called right mindfulness." So he's talking about four things here: body as body, feelings as feelings, mind as mind, and mental objects as mental objects. I'm going to explain to you guys what this is because it's the four foundations of mindfulness. But before we get to that, let me just talk about mindfulness in general. Mindfulness in general means awareness of mind. You're going to need to cultivate this awareness of mind because oftentimes in the unenlightened state, we don't have that. Right? Where we're just kind of plowing through the forest, knocking down the trees, burning up the forest. I know that's what I was doing before I understood these teachings. And then I kind of started smelling smoke and I looked behind me and I saw those trees were knocked down. I was like, who knocked down all those trees? Who lit those fires? And then I learned about right view and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm the one who knocked down those trees. I'm the one who lit those fires, right? So your mindfulness is to help you build awareness of mind, of what's going on, your thoughts, your ideas, your feelings, what's going on within this mind of yours. You need to develop this because this word mindfulness has made its way into common language and modern conversations, and people are actually using it in a way that the Buddha didn't teach. So if people were like to use it in that way, that's fine, but you're going to need to be able to understand how the Buddha taught it. Sometimes what people say is they say, can you mindfully carry this glass of water to that table? What they're saying is, can you carefully carry this glass of water to that table? That's not what the Buddha's talking about. What he's talking about is mindfulness, meaning awareness of mind, where you're aware of the mind and what's going on in the mind. So again, if those people would like to talk about it that way, it's up to them, but you need to get more and more in touch with what the Buddha taught, where you understand that he's helping you to understand that this mindfulness or awareness of mind is what's going to help you to transform your mind. Because how could you ever understand the wholesome and unwholesome qualities of your mind if you didn't have awareness of what's going on in your own mind, right? So that's where you would like to start. And sometimes for 3 months, 6 months, people just kind of hang out with that, kind of cultivating awareness of mind. And your meditation is going to help you do that. But in your day-to-day life, you're going to need to practice being mindful and awareness, having awareness of your mind all throughout your day. When you're first starting to wake up in the morning, all day long, and as you're going to sleep at night, you're going to need to have this awareness of your mind because your thoughts can invade you, right? And you're going to need to be able to take effort to be able to eliminate the unwholesome and arise the wholesome. But then as you develop the awareness of mind, you would like to understand the 4 foundations of mindfulness. This is a real key to you being able to get to enlightenment. You're going to need to have awareness of the bodily sensations. What the bodily sensations are is an early warning system alerting you that you're about to get angry or frustrated or some other discontent feeling. Whether it's a pleasant feeling, a painful feeling, or neither painful nor pleasant, there's going to be some bodily sensation that is arising before you experience the feeling. So for something like anger, it's usually going to be tingling in the body, rising up towards the head, tightening in the chest, tightening in the throat, pressure in the skull, heat in the face, you might actually notice some of these things. You may or may not be aware of them right now, but you're going to need to be aware of these because this is the early warning system alerting you that you're about to get angry. You're about to experience frustration or agitation or annoyance. And what the Buddha teaches you is to apply right effort to cut off and let go at the bodily sensation. You're not repressing your feelings or suppressing them. You're actually cutting it off before it even becomes a feeling. Hasn't even become a feeling yet. It's just a bodily sensation. And that would be ideal, to cut it off at the bodily sensations. It's kind of like if you were taking a boat from Canada to the UK, if you were out in the middle of the sea and you would like to prevent the water from ever coming into the boat. Because once the water gets into the boat, you've got a real problem to deal with. You've got to get this water out of the boat, right? So you would like to prevent the water from ever coming into the boat. Same thing with your mind. You would like to prevent the anger and frustration from ever coming into your mind. Because once it comes into your mind, you've got a real problem to deal with. You've got to get it out. So what you would like to do is build your mindfulness or your awareness of mind so well that you can notice the bodily sensation. And now you can cut it off and let it go. Your mindfulness is like a guard watching over your mind at all times, like a virus scanner sitting in the back of the computer, just kind of sitting there watching your hard drive, right? And if a virus comes onto your hard drive, it quarantines it, cleans it up, and gets it off your hard drive. Same thing. Is your mindfulness is watching over your mind. And if at any point you see this arising of bodily sensations, cut it off and let it go. Not repress it, but train your mind to cut it off and let it go. Then if you miss it as a bodily sensation, because you will, right now your mind's not well trained, so you're going to miss it as a bodily sensation. So that means it's going to become a feeling. So if you didn't cut it off as a bodily sensation, cut it off as a feeling. Right now, the anger just entered the mind. Oh my gosh, there's some anger. Cut that off. Get rid of it. Clear it out of the mind. Because if you don't cut it off there, it's going to affect the condition of your mind. Have you ever been grumpy or irritable for like a couple of hours or a day or two? Of course you have, right? Because we didn't understand this. We didn't have this wisdom. So now you're walking around grumpy and irritable and frustrated for a few days or a week or two. That's no fun, right? So the sooner you catch that and you cut it off and let it go, you're protecting your mind. And that's what you would like to be able to get to. Because if you don't cut it off as a condition of the mind, it's going to feed something called a mental object. What a mental object is a deeply rooted container in the mind where, in this example, it's ill will. Each of these fetters, each of these pollutions of mind that I'm going to teach you about as part of this course, they're all mental objects. So, for example, we weren't born with ill will in our mind. We didn't go into the nursery at the hospital hating other babies. That was formed over time. When we were kids and we got our chocolate and ice cream, we were really happy about that. But when we didn't get it, we got angry and frustrated. And we didn't cut it off as a bodily sensation. We didn't cut it off as a feeling. We didn't cut it off as a condition of the mind because we didn't even understand that this was what we needed to do. So therefore, our mind experienced the forming of this mental object, this deeply rooted container of ill will. And now your mind has ill will. That right now you're not angry, but it's a deeply rooted container in there. If one of your cravings, desires, attachments gets triggered, that ill will is going to come up and you're going to get angry and frustrated. So you would like to put a blockade at the bodily sensations, cutting off and letting go there as frequently as possible. All the while, you need to break up these mental objects and get them out of the mind. It's almost like a jackhammer that you're breaking those up and getting them out of the mind. So it's the 4 foundations of mindfulness that are going to help you to be aware of these things, that you have awareness of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. So this is the technical description of this. But now let me explain to you how this works in a practical situation. Let's just say I'm sitting here on the sofa watching the news. And as I'm watching the news, I'm noticing this frustration starting to build. Like there's this tingling in the body, tightening in the chest, the tightening in the throat, the heat in the face, pressure in the skull. You know, oh my goodness, there's some anger that's about to go into the mind, and you're not interested in that. So instead of just sitting there and dwelling in that, cut off the news. Go for a walk, go for a bike ride, go to the bathroom, wash your hands, go to the kitchen, get a glass of water, redirect the mind. That's applying right effort. with your right mindfulness, you saw the anger was about to arise, and now you're applying right effort to cut that off and let it go and send the mind in a different direction. If you do this enough, eventually you'll get to the point where anger never arises, that it's impossible for anger to arise because the mind is enlightened, because there's no craving, desire, attachments in the mind, right? So you'd like to be doing this not just with the painful feelings in the neither painful nor pleasant, but you need to do it with the conditioned pleasant feelings too. If you notice this excitement coming into the mind, you've got to cut that off. You've got to be willing to let go of the temporary pleasure in order to get to the permanent joy, the permanent happiness, right? If you keep allowing your mind to get happy and excited with some particular event, well, when that event isn't happening anymore, your mind's going to be sad or frustrated. So you need to be able to see these pleasant feelings as just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones. There's bodily sensations there too. Some people call them warm fuzzies. I don't know if you've heard that term before. It's like tingling across the shoulders, tingling up the back of the head and the neck, coming over the skull. And it's like, oh, that feels so pleasurable, right? The mind gets kind of indulgent in it. And it's like, oh, that feels so good, right? That's why your mind doesn't want to cut them off. But you got to realize, no, that's part of the problem. Cut that off and let it go. Don't allow your mind to do that. Where you can come to the middle, where your mind can just always be happy and always be cheerful. But you can't do that if you allow it to have conditional happiness. If you get really happy when it's sunny, like, oh, it's sunny outside. Well, when it rains, you're going to be sad and frustrated. Instead, it's like, oh, wow, it's sunny. Wow, this is going to be great. Let's go have a good time. Right? And then you're walking out the door and it starts pouring down raining. Well, guess I'm not going outside today, right? I'm going to stay inside, or at least for the next 20 minutes, right? I guess I'm just going to stay inside, right? You just maintain your happiness, right? That's what you would like to get to. So it's your mindfulness and your right effort that's going to help you to do that. But you wouldn't be able to practice right mindfulness without the next one, right concentration. Okay, so here's the Buddha describing right concentration. I'm not going to actually read this word for word here, but later in this course, I am going to read this, because what he's actually going to teach you is the jhanas. And I'm going to explain to you guys what he's teaching when we get to that part of our course tomorrow. Today, what I'm going to teach you is how to practice right concentration, because what he's teaching you here in the Eightfold Path is he's teaching you the results of having put together the entire Eightfold Path and what it's going to lead to, which is the jhanas. So I'm going to teach you that tomorrow. Today, what I'm going to teach you is how to practice right concentration, because you're going to need to practice right concentration in order to get to the jhanas, in order to develop mindfulness and apply right effort. So the way that he teaches you to practice right concentration, which you can find in his other teachings, is that you need to practice meditation and you need to practice singleness of mind. This is how you practice right concentration. So developing a meditation practice is to develop a breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation practice. These are two meditations that you're going to need to develop as part of your practice. Maybe you're already developing this, but I'm going to teach you as part of this course what these are and how to develop them. And you're going to need to build this up to 2 or 3 sessions per day for 30 minutes. So we're going to talk about that as part of this course. Then you're going to need to practice singleness of mind. Singleness of mind is doing just one thing at a time. Oftentimes people are taught to multitask. Your mind actually can't multitask. It's impossible. Your mind won't do more than one thing at a time. So if you're talking on the phone to your mom, if you're watching TV and you're eating a sandwich, you're not actually doing all 3 of those things. You're talking to your mom for a few seconds, you're watching TV for a few seconds, you're eating your sandwich for a few seconds. The mind's rapidly cycling amongst all of these things. That's why when you get off the phone, you can't even really remember what it is that you were talking about, because you don't have right concentration. And now you might actually find, if you do that on a daily basis, you find it very difficult to relax. You come home from work and your mind's all hyped up. You got all this stress and anxiety. It's kind of like a racehorse going to a racetrack. It's racing around the racetrack. And then when it goes to the barn, it can't calm down. It's the same thing with your mind, right? So you would like to do just one thing at a time, practicing singleness of mind. There's people in the world that didn't understand this. And because of the natural law of karma, they're actually dead right now. Right? Because if you're talking on the phone and you're walking down the street and you're not paying attention, next thing you know, you're out in the middle of the street whack and you're dead, right? This isn't a punishment. It's not a reward. It's just the results of your decisions that you didn't understand the natural law of karma, to just do one thing at a time. Or if you're washing dishes, right, and you notice your mind's wandering, you would like to cut that off and let it go and come back, because otherwise you're going to end up cutting yourself and you're going to be in the hospital, right? The mind thinks that somehow this is more beneficial to do multiple things, where your mind can't actually do multiple things. But in reality, it's causing you more difficulties. So you like to just do one thing at a time. You're in a business meeting and you're thinking about going to Thailand in 6 months. Your mind's wandering. You can't contribute to the business meeting. You're not doing what you need to do in that moment. So you need to bring your mind back to that, right? Maybe you're in a class and you're looking at the watch and it's like, wow, it's 12 o'clock. It's time to go to lunch. I was going to go get some mango and sticky rice, right? Maybe you're thinking about mango and sticky rice. You got to cut that off and let it go and come back to whatever you're focused on in that moment, right? So you need to practice singleness of mind in all situations. The way that I think about this is that if you had a piece of wood and a steel rod and you started grinding this steel rod back and forth, when you first start doing that, it's going to bounce around a lot because there's no groove there. That's what your mind's going to do. It's going to bounce around a lot. But when you grind this steel rod back and forth, you're going to get a nice groove going. And when it pops out, you're going to know that, and you're going to be able to bring it right back to the groove. And now you keep that steel rod going back and forth like this, and eventually you're going to get such a deep groove that it never pops out. And your mind's just always focused, is always concentrated. So that's what you need to do, is whenever you see your mind not focusing on singleness of mind, you cut that off and come back to whatever it is that you're doing. And over time, your mind will just always be focused. It'll always be concentrated. So this is right concentration, developing a meditation practice and practicing singleness of mind. So here's a summary of the mental discipline section. You would like to develop right effort, where you take the initiative to eliminate unwholesome aspects of the mind and to cultivate wholesome qualities of the mind. You're going to need to apply the effort to do that. There's nothing on the path to enlightenment that just magically happens. Sometimes I hear people say like, oh, that's just going to naturally fall away. It's not true. You're going to need to apply effort to eliminate these unwholesome qualities and apply effort to bring those into your mind. Then there's mindfulness, which is going to help you to apply that right effort. Your mindfulness is awareness of mind, where you have awareness of your thoughts, your ideas, your feelings, and all these things. But more specifically, it's the 4 foundations of mindfulness: being aware of that early warning system, the bodily sensations, to be aware of the feelings, to be aware of the condition of your mind, and the mental objects, those deeply rooted containers in the mind. Then you would like to develop right concentration, where you're developing a meditation practice and you're practicing singleness of mind in day-to-day life until your mind is experiencing the jhanas. And at that point, your practice is going to pivot a bit. You're still going to be doing all these things, but your practice is going to pivot. We're going to talk about this tomorrow. So this is a little summary of the mental discipline section. We just walk through this entire teaching. And if this is your first time hearing it, or even your second or third time, you're probably going to need to hear it again. You're going to need to learn it, right? You can't just learn something once and master it, right? So that's why you have the books, the audio books, the videos, the podcast. You can talk to me privately. Sometimes people like to study this, and then they sit down with me and they teach it to me so that they can get confirmation that they understand it and they've committed it to their mind. I have a study guide for this on our website. If you go to our website, buddhadailywisdom.com, and click on free books, if you scroll down towards the bottom, you're going to see a study guide where it helps you to be able to study this and commit it to your memory, because you're going to need to commit this to your memory in order to practice it. You're not going to be able to practice it if you haven't committed it to your memory. So do you guys have any questions on any aspect of this?
Is around right mindfulness, specifically like the central desire around sound. There are many things that the mind still needs to work through, but for example, there are some sounds that it has actively trained through right mindfulness. Okay, and I'm sitting wherever and I notice that the mind is not discontent where it used to be, that bodily sensations aren't arising. But the mind still gets pulled from that sound to be aware of this sound. And I don't know if this makes sense, but there's so many sounds around us all the time, but the mind is still getting pulled to sounds that in the past they found disagreeable. So they're no longer like, this is frustrating, this is irritating, but the mind is also losing that focus where it's pulling its attention away. So I don't know how to resolve this.
Sure. So what this is, we call this residual clinging, where the mind doesn't have that deep craving anymore that's producing discontentness, but there's just some little bit of clinging, residual clinging, right? So when we talk about craving, desire, attachment, it's actually a spectrum, right? You can have these really strong, deeply held cravings, or you can have these little tiny little clinging of the mind, right? And the mind's not necessarily experiencing discontentedness, but it's still being pulled, right, in that direction. So it's still the same thing, that with your mindfulness, and you see your mind doing that, you apply right effort to cut that off and let it go. Bring it back. And now you just got to keep doing that and doing that and doing that and doing that. The way that I think about it is like either a wild bush that you got to cut it back and cut it back and cut it back and cut it back and cut it back. And then eventually you uproot it and eliminate it out of the mind. Or the other way is the analogy you've heard before with the post and the pillar, and the animal pulls and yanks back and pulls and yanks back. It'll do that for a good long while before it'll just sit there and be calm by the post or pillar. So, you know, an animal being tied to a post or pillar, maybe it pulls for 30 minutes or an hour, but eventually it's going to stop pulling. Right? Your mind, unfortunately, is not going to be 30 minutes or an hour. It's going to be multiple months and sometimes years with some of these cravings that it just keeps getting pulled, and you got to yank it back and yank it back and yank it back. So yeah, you're not going to get the discontentedness, but it's still pulling. And that's what you've got to be aware of with your mindfulness, and then apply right effort to cut it off and pull it back to the middle. Mm-hmm.
Oh, the batteries
Oh, there we go.
say they're very low.
Okay.
You mentioned before that throughout the day, especially close to like the evening, your mindfulness it's not as strong.
The batteries are impermanent.
And it's like this bodily sensation sometimes with like ants, that I'm laying in bed and like an ant will be crawling on me. And before I even I'm swatting it away. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I just killed an ant, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And during the day, it's much more aware of these things and it's much more careful. But at night, sometimes I'm doing these things and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just killed another ant.
Yeah.
So, but how can you actively train your mind at night? That's I don't know what you can suggest for this too.
Yeah, you need to be devoted to wakefulness. That's what the Buddha calls it. That even in the morning as you're first waking up, and even as you're going to sleep at night, be aware that your thoughts can invade you at that time. To be awake and have wakefulness, you need to be devoted to that wakefulness. That even in that particular moment, there's an ant crawling on you, and you just know, you just blow it off, or you go over to the window and you kind of swipe it off a little bit. So you just need to be devoted to this and understand how unwise it is to be able to allow your mind to do that. And that's just where you just be dedicated and diligent to this, and just understand you're going to have, missteps here and there, and that's normal, but you would like to just be devoted to this wakefulness and know that it's a full-time job from the moment you wake up all day long and as you're going to sleep. And just have the wisdom to know that, okay, I'm going to need to apply extra effort here during this period of time where I'm falling asleep or getting close to falling asleep. Mm-hmm.
But what you would do, you personally, you're so close to falling asleep and you feel this ant crawling on your skin. Would you just let this ant continue to crawl, or would you?
No, because to have loving kindness and compassion for this being, you need to take care of this body. So what I would do is I would get up and I would go over to the window and I would, blow it off to be able to make sure that it can go and be on its merry way. And then I keep this body healthy and comfortable. Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that, oh, more questions? Yeah.
You talked about the middle way of compassion. I didn't really understand that.
The middle way with compassion.
Yeah.
So, on one side of compassion, well, let's talk about compassion. Compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. It doesn't mean you're going to necessarily do something, but you need to maintain the mental quality of having concern for others in their misfortune, right? So, on one side of compassion, you have indifference, where you could care less about what other people experience, right? That's not what you're interested in. It's like, who cares that person's homeless? I don't care. It's not my mom. It's not my dad, my brother, sister. I don't care. That's indifference. That's not what you're interested in. It's not going to produce peace and joy. But on the other side of that, you've got worry and anxiety. Like, oh my gosh, those kids don't have food. What are they going to do? And now you're worried about them all day long or multiple weeks, and your mind's just ruminating about these kids that don't have food. Well, what you would like to do is come to the middle, where your mind is having concern for their misfortune, and there's that quality of concern, but you're not affected by either indifference or anxiety and worry. And understanding that your decision of whether you choose to help in any situation, that's a separate decision. That's whether you're going to practice generosity or not. Because in every situation, you can't have generosity. So for example, I used to ride a motorbike, and when I would see an accident, in most cases, I would pull over and I would help that person because I have a certain amount of skills that I learned when I was growing up as first aid skills. So I'd pull over and try to see if I can help them with any first aid. I would set their bike up and kind of help them out, right? So this was my compassion because I had concern for their misfortune, but then I also chose to practice generosity, where I was sharing my time, effort, energy, and resources without any expectation of anything in return, right? But there were other situations where I still had compassion, but I didn't practice generosity. Like maybe I was driving down the road on my motorbike and I see an accident, right? And maybe I'm taking my son some food because maybe one time he said like, hey dad, he called me. He's like, hey, I've been home all day by myself. There's no food here. It's 2 p.m. Could you bring me some food? And I was like, oh, I didn't realize there's no food. Sure, I'll bring you some food. What do you want? And of course he said pizza. Right. So I brought him some pizza, and I have this pizza on my motorbike, and I'm making my way home and I see an accident. Right. And right away, my compassion is, what's going on here? And then when I look, I see that there's 2 or 3 people helping that person. And I'm like, sweet, they already have somebody helping them. I don't need to stop. I can continue on my motorbike and get this pizza home to this other person who needs the food. So in that situation, I had compassion. I had concern for their misfortune. That's why I looked and I checked to see if they had somebody to help them. And if they didn't have anybody helping them, I would have stopped most likely, right? So in that situation, there was compassion, but I didn't choose to practice any generosity in that situation. I was already practicing generosity, taking this food home to my son. So compassion is just a mental quality that you'd like to maintain at all times. And then depending on what's going on, you're going to need to decide what to do in any given situation, because there's no 2 situations that are the same. There's unique variables in each situation, and you've got to be able to move to this higher consciousness and decide what would be wise or unwise for you in any given situation.
So what is like in the other extreme where you have like anxiety or maybe guilt and anger for someone that does harm for another? Like what is the antidote for this extreme?
The antidote is to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. That's what's causing that anger and frustration. And you need to eliminate that. That's the unwholesome quality that you're applying effort to eliminate, the craving, desire, attachment. And then you need to apply the effort to arise loving kindness. That's the antidote to any anger, frustration, even the minor versions of that, like dislike. You might have certain people that you like and certain people that you dislike. That dislike is coming from the mind itself because of its craving. So you've got to eliminate the craving for permanence, that I want everybody to do it this way. And if they do it this way, I like them. And if they don't do it that way, I dislike them. that's the mind's craving, desire, attachment. So you got to get rid of the craving, desire, attachment, but then you also need to arise loving kindness, which is going to get rid of that frustration, agitation, even the slightest annoyance in the mind. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. I don't see any questions anywhere. So I'm going to end by thanking you guys for your interest to learn and understand the teachings of the Buddha. I'm going to be picking this up this afternoon, helping you guys to understand the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots. We're going to take a break for lunch. It's now 12:20. We're going to come back from lunch. I'm going to do meditation with you guys, and then I'm going to teach you the 3 poisons. This is going to kind of broaden your understanding of what's going on in the mind and really deepen it, because the Four Noble Truths gives you like a little window into understanding what's going on in the mind, but the problem is actually much bigger than just craving that you've learned about, this attachment. It's much bigger than that. So the 3 poisons are going to help you to understand that. So we can get back together at an hour and a half. Let's just call that, what is that, 1:45? That's about an hour and a half. You guys good with that? 1:45? Okay. So I'll see you guys at 1:45. Okay. So thank you guys so much. All right.